A note from the author. This book should not be disregarded as yet another tell-all about the fabulous life of society's high-regarded celebrities. It is also not an attempt to play victim or take others in as casualty. This is not my intention. I consider this my closure and my rebirth. This is my story as I remember it. All of the events and experiences detailed are true and have been written as I remember them. Some of the names in this book are of actual people, and for the sake of those who are dear to my heart, some are fictional. For the truth in me, I am not interested in protecting the integrity or confidentiality of any of the various individuals involved who have shown no consideration for me. This writing is not written to represent word-for-word documentation. However, I have retold this story in a way that expresses the real feeling and meaning of what was said, in keeping with the true essence of the mood and to bring to life the spirit of the event. I spent half of my 20s and most of my 30s grooming one of my former best friends, Robert Kelly, for stardom. Resentment was very much present, and this writing helped me to release that pain. For years I have had a personal battle within myself for all of the bad decisions I made. Those left offended should consider this one not interested in protecting the integrity or confidentiality of any of the various individuals involved who have shown no consideration for me. This writing is not written to represent word-for-word documentation. However, I have retold this story in a way that expresses the real feeling and meaning of what was said, in keeping with the true essence of the mood and to bring to life the spirit of the event. I spent half of my 20s and most of my 30s grooming one of my former best friends, Robert Kelly, for stardom. Resentment was very much present, and this writing helped me to release that pain. For years I have had a personal battle within myself for all of the bad decisions I made. Those left offended should consider this one question. Have you thought of me? Quote, this book is a pivotal testimony. I welcome you to follow me on my pursuit of restoration. It is said, the truth will set you free. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid, that shall not be known. Chapter 1. The Sacrifice. Life in the music business. The glamour, the fame and the hype of it wasn't all that it claimed to be. At least not for me it wasn't. It all started off with us believing we were on a mission or a spiritual calling. I have always thought everybody should be helping somebody, allowing that somebody to help somebody else. In doing so, everybody would be looking out for one another. It would be a great big beautiful world. But with the lumps and detours along the way, I didn't see what was to come. We were young singers with a strong desire to become successful entertainers in the music industry. Chapter 15. The Motor City, Demon Lurking. When we returned to the States, Barry wasted no time informing me how well the song, Vibe, was rising on the pop charts. You may as well get you another suitcase and pack it right back up. You've got 2 more tours ahead of you taking off in a month, Barry said as we were unloading the bus at the Best Western Hotel. In the meantime, before taking off again, Barry wanted me to make sure I had Robert in the studio ASAP. He wanted Robert to get started on the remix for Vibe and start production on the next single, Honey Love. Barry was hanging out in Chicago with us during this time while we were preparing for the next tour. Rob requested his presence. I heard him on the phone a lot of times telling him, "B, I need you here with me." They had become quite a pair. Oftentimes I thought Robert was trying to take on Barry's personality. One night, while we were in the lounge area of CRC Studios shooting some pool, Barry was talking about his niece, Aaliyah. Barry said he wanted us to drive to Detroit, Michigan so we could meet her and her family. He told us how she was on Star Search. He wanted Robert to develop her skills and possibly produce her. I just need to know if she has what it takes to become a successful recording artist, is how Barry put it. He said every time he saw Aaliyah, She was singing. She really wants to be a singer. And if she's got what it takes and you can help her do a project in the studio, then I want to be behind her and give her whatever she needs. And if she's not ready, I think she'll know. She's a real smart girl. Top of her class in school, Barry said proudly of his niece. It was the fall in 1992, late evening, when Robert and I headed to Detroit to meet up with Barry. He would then take us over to meet his niece, Aaliyah, and her family, Larry, Tori, and DJ Mouse, another buddy of ours, were tailing along with us in a separate car. We were given an address to Barry's home in Detroit, and when we got there, we were received with a warm welcome. There was nothing we couldn't have in the house. Barry, being the busy man that he was, had a meeting and couldn't stay with us. He was trying to set something up for Robert to have a guitar player by the name of Michael Powell lay down some guitar licks on a few of his songs. Barry was making things happen. In his domain, it was all about making us feel comfortable and at home. Come to think of it, I don't remember any of us sharing a room. We didn't check or look around the house. I know I was tired. All I wanted to do was get some rest after that 5-hour drive and being up since 4 in the morning. I settled in a room while Robert and the rest of the guys went to watch some of the videotapes Rob made with the new camcorder he recently bought. The next morning, I spoke to Barry and he gave me the directions to Aaliyah's house. When we got there, it was another warm welcome. Everybody was polite. My first impression when meeting Aaliyah and her family was that of a close family. I felt a genuine goodness in meeting her mother, Ms. Diane Houghton, her father Mr. Michael Houghton, and Aaliyah's older brother, Rashad Houghton. Aaliyah had already heard R. Kelly's songs over the radio and she probably had a copy of his album. When they met Rob, he insisted they all call him Robert or Rob. He told them R. Kelly was just a show business name. Aaliyah was star-struck by his presence. As young as she was, it was only natural. In her girlish way, she was a giggly little sweetheart. Her magnetic smile had a glitter that showed she was mesmerized with R. Kelly the artist being there. In her house, she was so adorable, and Robert's boyish ingenuousness had Aaliyah and her whole family charmed. Aaliyah's mom, Diane, wouldn't stop offering things to us. She wanted to make sure that we knew that we were welcome. Just make yourselves at home, y'all, she kept saying. She was also excited about our visit. She wanted to hear and see her baby girl entertain us. Aaliyah looked and carried herself like her mom. Her hair was even styled just like her mom. It was like looking at Aaliyah as a child and then as a woman when you looked at the two of them together. The reality was Mom was now watching the offspring of her beauty unfold. Diane was rejoicing along with and for her daughter. It was a happy time in the Houghton's house that day. Mike Houghton, Aaliyah's dad, was laid back with his eye on his family's joy. Mike was cool. His goal was to learn the business. He wanted to know how to make good decisions. I mean, hey, for my baby girl, I need to know it all, he would say, keeping his composure so as to be taken seriously. You could see the joy through his strength, which was covered by the seriousness of his facial expression. His only concern was for the safety and well-being of his baby girl Aaliyah. Mike and I didn't talk long, but when we did talk, it was truly an exchange of intellect. The whole Houghton family was cool. As I looked at Barry, Aaliyah, and their family, they reminded me of the Cosbys. Diane was every bit like a Philika Rashad. Aaliyah's older brother, Rashad, was about 15 or 16 at the time. I never asked anybody's age. I know Rashad was a cool, laid-back, young Grant Hill look-alike kind of kid. He carried his basketball around with him throughout the house. Rashad admired Robert too, but he was outspoken and pretty funny when Rob asked him if he could sing. He responded bashfully telling us b-ball was his thing. and said he was working on his game. "You'll have a problem with me though," he told Rob. Of course it brought laughter from us all. But Rashad was serious. He stood proud, knowing he had just initiated a challenge to R. Kelly to meet him on the basketball court. Accepting the challenge, Rob told me to find a gym. But Barry suggested I contact his son Jomo, who was also in town. Jomo told me he'd come by to pick us up and that finding a gym would be no problem. In the meantime, we were taken into the den, and as soon as Rob saw the upright piano, he walked right over to it as if it were calling him. I smiled and watched because I knew what he was about to do. Rob had a way of using music to enchant people. Rob would have people under a spell as they listened to him play and sing at the piano. He was a true entertainer. He knew how to set the mood. And once he had his audience, he would go off into his emotions, touching the very soul of his listener. Rob was Donny Hathaway when he sang A Song for You, Luther Vandross when he sang A House Is Not a Home, and Marvin Gaye when he sang Let's Get It On. Robert Kelly was a young maestro with a gift of being able to express his heart in song. He would sing those songs, arrange them to fit his style, and then deliver the song from his soul directly to his audience. You could feel him, as he sat playing and singing for Aaliyah and her family. He would do one of his own original songs, and while playing, he'd reach out for Aaliyah to join him. While into the melody of his music, he would give Aaliyah notes or parts to sing along with him, creating a new song in the eve of the moment. Robert was awesome. He could produce anybody. I couldn't wait for the time to come when he would summon me into the studio. I always saw Robert Kelly as being anointed with his gift in music. Barry, Diane, Mike, heck, all of us were in awe at how relaxed and how freely Aaliyah's gifted vocals began to unfold. Robert brought the quality of her voice out of her in just one session. It was magic. Aaliyah, with her girlish jitters, was hitting high notes on key and with a perfect enduring pitch. She sounded like the angel she was. I knew in the back of my mind as I watched and listened to R. Kelly coach Aaliyah, touching on the immaculate vocals she possessed. It was a done deal. Aaliyah was going to be R. Kelly's next production project, the first artist he would produce under Blackground Enterprises. It was plain to see. At least for me it was. Aaliyah had a gift. There was uniqueness in her voice. The purity of her voice generated a blissfulness of enduring soft tones. It was easy to be captivated into Aaliyah's musical world. Robert and Aaliyah worked out for a good 30 or 40 minutes. Everybody was feeling good and knew something special had transpired. Barry, Mike, Robert and I wandered into the kitchen. Barry wanted Robert's honest opinion. "So what do you think, Rob? Does she have it?" Barry asked, with a serious look on his face that said he desired the truth. Rob looked at him as if he was surprised at the question. "Are you serious? Didn't you just hear her? Does she have it?" "That and more, Barry. That and more," Rob said, shaking his head, assuring Barry of his sincerity. We hung out at Aaliyah's house until Jomo came over. He found a gym for us, not far from where we were. Our focus shifted straight to basketball. "Yeah, I wanna see what you got now, buddy," Rob said to Rashad once we all grabbed our coats to leave. All of the guys, except for Barry and Aaliyah's dad, Mike, headed out in separate cars to a youth center Jomo had lined up. Jomo invited other ball players there to play a full court game. Robert and Rashad didn't get to play against each other. Robert called himself pulling him under his wing, so they played on the same team together. Robert was somewhat schooling Rashad throughout the afternoon. After the game we met Barry back at his house. After freshening up, Barry took us to a soul food restaurant. This place was a house that looked like a mansion and the food was out of sight. We feasted like we were rich. There was no limit to what we could order. We were having a ball in Detroit with Barry, so we decided to spend another night. After we ate, we hung out at the mall for a few hours. I did our mall scheme, recognizing a celebrity shopping in the mall and bringing it to the attention of other shoppers. From that, Robert signed a few autographs and took a few phone numbers. One thing they didn't do is invite anyone over to Barry's house. Robert had much respect for Barry and he didn't want Barry to know any of his weaknesses. I think in Robert's eyes, Barry was his new daddy. Robert always gave the impression that he was a shy and naive young kid. But he wasn't. When the evening was over, it was back to work for me. I was consumed with putting together the travel plans for the tour. I had writers to prepare and memos to send out to the record company and to the promoters of the tour. I also had to schedule the phone interviews and ensure Robert did them. That in itself was a job. Most of the time, I would have to go wherever Rob was to make sure he made his calls because he wouldn't make them on his own. I would literally dial the numbers and connect with whomever. And at the moment of connection, I would hand Robert the phone. I used to hate doing that. I felt he should have been excited to talk to the people who were promoting his album and speaking to the fans who were buying his album. Nonetheless, we got the job done. It was after midnight and I was in my room on the computer at Barry's house working on a rider. A rider is a list of equipment and food items an artist wants in the dressing room in every city. It also included a list of equipment needs for the band and anything else Robert wanted. I had to put it on paper and send it out to the promoters as part of the contract obligations. I was busy and lost in my work when Robert knocked on the door. "Come on in," I told him as he stood on the outside knocking. When he came into the room, he looked distressed. He had 3 maybe 4 VCR tapes in his hand. I didn't want to watch movies. What was wrong with him? I thought, but the more I looked at him, he wasn't flinching. He was struggling with something within himself. Concerned over his apparent distress, I asked in an urgent tone, "What's wrong with you, Rob?" I stood up to look over his physical appearance, to see if he was injured in any way, but he wasn't. When Robert was troubled, it troubled me. Standing there looking at him with this disturbed look on his face. I thought somebody did something to him or something. Robert would come to me at times when something was bothering him. The way he confided in me was what separated me from everybody else. He knew I had his back. It was those kinds of moments that made me think Robert and I were close. And no matter what, we had each other's back. It was my job to protect Robert. When he was going through something, I took on that burden as well. He began telling me he felt something had a hold on him. These tapes. Johnny man, I can't seem to control myself taping myself with my girls. Man, and I know this ain't right and it's going to end up getting me in trouble. I know, he said, looking grievously vexed. I could not imagine what was so bad on those tapes. But for Robert to be hurting over them, I gave him my full attention. Robert was crying over this something. I had no choice but to take him seriously. This something, as he called it, had him feeling he was addicted to recording the women he was sexing in his life. I didn't know how to handle this problem. I actually didn't see anything wrong with it. It was all in fun, I thought. Then again, there is a person's privacy. Robert had a lot of spiritual values implanted in him. After all, his music teacher was the Reverend Lena McLean. Robert was right. We had to confront this lurking demon. Something had my young brother feeling guilt, and I wanted to aid and assist him as best I could. Robert knew the Bible and he felt as if he was being pulled in the direction of evil. He told me he was so active with the ladies and only for the reason to tape their actions. I believed him. And all I could come up with for us to do was to pray. So we prayed together, asking God to take away that which was making Robert feel controlled. We prayed to God, asking him to cover Robert from the evil which was lurking. However, during our prayer, we did not add any scriptures, which today I know would have allowed God to hear him. This was all so weird and new to me, and for Robert to be as distressed as he was, I began to believe in demons myself. Robert was a spiritual young man. I wasn't sure of to what degree of spiritual knowledge he possessed. I just believed in him enough to know he was real about his apparent distress. We were young and it was early in our careers. I wasn't thinking about demons. We were supposed to be having fun. Thinking back, it was about this time when Robert started to disconnect from us, his friends. As time went on, he became heartless and selfish. Robert was in trouble and I didn't realize the seriousness of what he was telling me. I didn't know it to be a big thing. We prayed over this demon, but we really didn't know anything about prayer. At least I didn't. I believed in God and I believed he loved me and would protect me. And that's all. I didn't really know how to communicate with him. I wish I had have known more about prayer and spirits because they do exist. This demon Robert was dealing with was just like the drug demon that entered my life to kill me back in the day. But this was a demon with a different game. Recognizing this demon, Robert reached out for help. But there was no help for him in sight. He had a dark secret. He was obsessed with videotaping his private moments behind closed doors with his lady friends. The boy had a thing for pornography. This was something Robert wouldn't share with Barry or anyone else. These kind of moments separated me from everyone else. Robert and I were like brothers. If only I knew what he was really dealing with at the time, I could have been his better judgment. But I didn't know any better myself. Robert was just a kid with a bunch of groupie friends that were willing to do whatever it took to be in his presence. We all reached out for help when we're in need. And for a lot of us, no one hears our cry. And because of our lack of understanding on how to deal with evil ways, that evil becomes a part of us. And it becomes easier and easier to dwell in that evil until we're lost and fully consumed. We all lack wisdom in making the best decisions. And when we make the wrong decisions, we find ourselves in need. Sometimes seemingly, there's no way out. We pray because we want to believe things can go a better way. We hope, in our praying, for a solution and that things don't get any worse. It is because of my knowledge today that I will not throw a stone at Robert. James chapter 2 verse 14 asks, "What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him?" At the time, I thought my faith, along with us praying together, was enough to protect Robert from the demon lurking within him. James chapter 2 verse 15 says, "If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Depart in peace, be warmed and filled,' but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." Nothing happened for Robert that night because I didn't give him that which he needed. We believed in our prayer. At least I did. But it was faith without works. So it was nothing. The next morning, we headed back to Chicago. I asked Robert how he was doing with the problem he said he had. He told me he was cool. He did not really speak on it. So, I left it at that. I mean, you would think when you cry over something, one would have to add a little strength and say no to overcome something that was bringing him pain. If he wanted to truly beat it, that is. I figured Robert would do what he needed to do to overcome his situation. I didn't ask again. I noticed that he never threw away his camera. He always kept that with him. I figured if he really felt that what he was doing was a danger to him, that he would do the right thing. All he had to do was not record his intimate times with whoever he was spending those private moments with. How hard could that be? Little did I know, however, that would be proven eventually to be as hard as a drug addict denying themselves of a last hit. Chapter 17. Shattered Pieces. After a couple days of roaming the club circuit, it was back to CRC Studios. Barry Hankerson negotiated a deal with Jive Records that allowed R. Kelly to produce an album for Aaliyah. Robert took writing songs for Aaliyah seriously. He asked me what I thought of a woman singing the song "At Your Best" by the Isley Brothers. "It's a beautiful song," I told him. But little did I know how beautiful that song really was until R. Kelly began to lay down the tracks. For Aaliyah, it was time to meet up with Aaliyah again. R. Kelly and I drove to Detroit to meet with Aaliyah and her family. R. Kelly had laid down some tracks and wanted to go over some vocals with her. The hospitality was the same when we got to Aaliyah's house. Her mother, Diane, and her father, Mike, were the perfect hosts, accommodating our every need, which was only to have Aaliyah available for R. Kelly to work alone with her. We arrived early that day. R. Kelly didn't feel we needed to stay the whole weekend. His intent was to synchronize her vocals to his tracks. But once we were there, we ended up staying over a few extra nights at Aaliyah's home with her parents. Robert and Aaliyah spent time together singing. R. Kelly was fascinated by Aaliyah's voice. I sat with them, fascinated myself at how R. Kelly brought out the quality of this young girl's voice. R. Kelly's sleeping habits were like that of a vampire. He would sleep all day and work all night. His day never began until nighttime. After sitting around all day watching television and playing basketball, it was around 11 o'clock at night when R. Kelly decided to go over some vocals with Aaliyah. Mike and Diane had already retired for the evening, and I decided to do the same, leaving R. Kelly and Aaliyah alone to work. That night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, R. Kelly finally came to the basement where we slept and woke me up. He said that he wanted to talk about the song that he had in mind for Aaliyah. "Man, she inspires me," he said of Aaliyah. He was somewhat tender-hearted. Benevolent would be a better way to put it. Producing a platinum album for Aaliyah was a priority goal for him. That night, Aaliyah and R. Kelly connected. As we were driving home that next morning, R. Kelly was on the cell phone with the sound engineer, Peter Mokaran, giving him instructions on what to have ready for him, urging Peter to be there at the studio and to be ready when we got there. I knew Aaliyah was special, especially in Robert's eyes. For the next couple of months, we stayed in the studio. R. Kelly and Peter would work all night, and R. Kelly would sleep in the studio during the day. The little, young, fast girls that had been hanging around R. Kelly at his apartment, Tia, Shay, and a few others, were singing in the background for Robert on Aaliyah's tracks. Most people thought R. Kelly had something other than music going on with these kids. And I myself had wondered. I never saw him messing with those girls. He laughed and joked with them. But in a lot of ways Rob was a big kid himself. I mean, I did feel like he could have them sexually if he wanted to. But then again, in my eyesight, R. Kelly was a player. He had women. As far as the girls that hung around the studio with Robert were concerned, I didn't know their age. I felt that they were of age. It was apparent their parents didn't have a problem with them being out in the late hours of the night. The girls came and went as they pleased. He always told me that they were talented and that he was going to produce them. As I listened to Tia and Shay sing, I was totally surprised. Tia had a voice with quality and strength like Whitney Houston. R. Kelly saw things in people that others didn't. I never saw him messing with those girls. He laughed and joked with them. But in a lot of ways Robert was a big kid himself. I mean, I did feel like he could have them sexually if he wanted to. But then again, in my eyesight, R. Kelly was a player. He didn't know what he was doing though. But at the same time I was admirable of the older women whom he kept company with. There was Samota, Tina, Kim, and this is only a few names. These women had their own They were independent women and around the same age as Robert, if not older. I'm just saying that to say Robert had choices. As far as the girls who hung around, it was apparent their parents didn't have a problem with them being out in the late hours of the night. The girls came and went as they pleased. I saw R. Kelly with his focus on producing a platinum album for Aaliyah. And whatever he needed to add to accommodate his goal, he added it. I tell you, this guy was a genius when it came to the God-given gift and talent with music he had. The young girls who were hanging around, they all had a purpose in Robert's music. When it was time for Aaliyah to come to Chicago, R. Kelly wanted her and her family to be totally comfortable. He offered them his apartment in Lake Point Towers on 36th floor, overlooking Chicago's skyline. As a matter of fact, he insisted they stay at his place and he in turn would stay at the Best Western Hotel. But Aaliyah's mom, she was not with Robert putting himself out, so they all stayed together at his place. I created an itinerary for Diane that informed her of the things R. Kelly lined up for Aaliyah. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I would pick up Aaliyah to have lunch. After lunch, Aaliyah would go to the studio with R. Kelly, where he arranged for her to have vocal training, which Robert said it was only to strengthen her voice. After her vocal lessons, Aaliyah would return to R. Kelly's condo with her mom. R. Kelly gave them the key to the city. I saw to it that wherever they wanted to go, whatever they wanted to do and whatever they needed was made available for them. It was always 10 p.m. when Aaliyah would be summoned to the studio, accompanied by her mother, of course. It was all work in the studio with R. Kelly, Aaliyah, Tia, Shay, and Shauna. It was always amazing watching Robert work. He was cunning in so many ways to get what he needed in obtaining the best out of a person. He would stop in the middle of a song if they weren't singing their notes correctly, or if someone seemed out of sync. He'd just jump up and tell Peter to shut it down for a few hours. Come on, everybody. I feel like ice cream in a movie. Johnny, go get the car for us, he'd tell me. All together, R. Kelly, Diane, Aaliyah, Tia, Shauna, and I, we would all end up at the movies. After the movie or ice cream, we'd be right at the studio continuing where we left off. But this time, whatever was not happening right came to order. R. Kelly had a way of bringing the best out of a person. He was a young genius and Aaliyah was a happy spirit when she was in the studio with Robert. She used to sing in the dark. All of the lights in the booth had to be off. She got that from R. Kelly. She wanted to be as free as he was when it came to perfecting her art in music. The songs started flowing out of R. Kelly for Aaliyah to sing. And like the songbird she was, she sang with heartfelt feeling, bringing life to every song. It didn't take R. Kelly long at all to finish Aaliyah's debut album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. The next tour was the next level up. We were booked as a co-headliner act. People were paying big bucks to see us. One would wonder if I had a family or life of my own, since all of my time was spent preparing for the next tour and assisting R. Kelly and Aaliyah. His status grew so much I was working 24/7 keeping busy with R. Kelly's career events. How I found the time to do all the things I got done, I do not know, but I was moving up and it wasn't easy. While LaWanda nagged me about money and Tamikia fighting about everything other than anything that had to do with my daughter, how I found time to carry my work and manage my home life was only by the grace of God. It was very difficult for me because more than anything, I wanted my children together, and with the forces that were in my life it was a challenge to make that happen. Shit always all of a sudden changed directions on me in my life. Later I ended up getting custody of my daughter from Tamikia. Time was moving on. My life was so filled with so much to do. I wondered sometimes if I was overloading myself. The only thing that kept me sane was the fact that I was so buried in my work. I did not have time to deal with all the things that were changing the course of my life. My daughter ended up living with my sister Dee in Harvey, Illinois, and I stayed in the studio day and night working with Robert to make things happen. I needed this to work. My life was at stake. I had to be able to buy a home so I could get my family back. With all the odds seemingly against me, there was still some good in it. Okay, R. Kelly. Let's do this. Let's try it your way. I thought, if you can't beat him, join him. I was going to turn a page and try again to put the pieces to my dream together. My life was going upward bound. I worked daily planning tours, monitoring the rehearsals with public announcement, staying with R. Kelly for the times he had to do phone interviews or have photo shoots, and I was hanging out club hopping again. I received and sent out all the information needed for the Salt and Pepper tour. I was looking forward to this tour, traveling with these lovely ladies. I loved me some Cheryl James. Ms. Salt. She was the special one that caught my eye from the very first time I saw the group. Don't get me wrong, I loved Sandy Denton, Peppa, and Deidre, Dee Roper. Ms. DJ Spinderella, too. This tour was special for me. It was scheduled to take off in Miami, Florida. In preparation for the tour, we built a whole new stage and R. Kelly had orchestrated a whole new show. Time had moved on. The Born Into the 90s album went platinum and began to peak. In what seemed like overnight, R. Kelly had finished his 12-play album and Sex Me was about to drop. Every night and all through the day, I would ride around with Rob, waiting in the car, getting mad at him on some occasions for having me sit in the car for periods of time, while he entertained the beautiful women he had in his life. The boy had the makings of a true player. I kid you not. It was strange when R. Kelly would pull me to the side at times and talk about how he was having second thoughts about releasing the single, Sex Me, which was also on the 12-play album. He was under a lot of stress about that song. Spiritually, he felt that the song was too vulgar and he didn't think his mom would approve of the song at all. Can you believe it? R. Kelly felt as though the song was too sexual. The spiritual side of him was subconsciously hindered. He was very remorseful over the song. Strange as it may sound, R. Kelly felt the song was sinful. During this time his mother was sick. So Rob was going through some things and maybe he was looking for an escape of some sort. I don't know. There were two sides to Robert. There was Robert Kelly, who was caring, playful, and studious when he would listen. Then there was R. Kelly. He was totally opposite. He cared about himself and he took selfishness to another level. At first, I began to think his ways was because of youth and, I would say, his lack of education. He wanted to control everything and everybody and he was always right about everything. There was no listening. It was his way or no way at all. He had changed. He became egotistic and self-centered. I spoke with Barry from time to time about Robert. I was searching for answers that would help assist me with him. Barry felt that Robert was going through a phase that most young artists go through in the beginning of their career. You're going to have to be creative with arranging to have the things Robert wants as perks, and the things Robert needs. Your job is not going to be an all-out easy job. But it's a good place to be, Barry said. I took his advice to heart. It was good solid advice. Robert and I weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. And on the coming tour, I wanted to be ahead of the game with him. He knew the tour with Salt and Peppa was another level up the scale. We were now booked to perform in arenas in front of larger crowds of people. All while we were preparing for the tour, R. Kelly was in the studio with Aaliyah. She and her mom, Diane, would fly back and forth to Chicago on the weekend because Aaliyah was still in school. It was always a joyful time when Ms. Lady Diane and Aaliyah were there. I called her that because that is how I remember Aaliyah's mom. She carried herself as if she were royalty. And I am saying that in a complimentary way. Ms. Diane was elegant. That's why Aaliyah was so special. One thing for sure, we hung out and stayed at the movies and ate popcorn a lot. Aaliyah's album was R. Kelly's pet project and turning out a sound that was developing to be something really special. I worked along with Jomo Hankerson making preparations to shoot the video for Aaliyah's first single, Back and Forth, in Chicago. Jomo was the man that moved Roberts's career. He was Aaliyah's cousin and the man I communicated with once our tour negotiations were over. Jomo was the top man for Blackground Enterprises. He was the one moving Aaliyah's career to rise. Yeah, my future had promise. Teaming up with Jomo made me feel like I would be in an executive position myself one day. For this video shoot, I was on Aaliyah's payroll, making $800 for that entire day. I was also being highly considered to be her tour manager. Things were going to balance out. I was happy with the thought of working on the road as Aaliyah's tour manager too. When it was time to shoot the video, Aaliyah's whole family came up with her at the video shoot, which was on the top level of the parking lot next door to CRC Studio on Ohio Street. Aaliyah's dad, Mike, and I were talking while we were shooting the video. He confided in me on how uneasy he was with Aaliyah being out late in the studio all night. When he stated that to me, I was a bit uneasy myself because for one, I liked Mike, and two, I was feeling the same way. Looking at Aaliyah as a minor and from a parent's perspective, I wanted him to know of my suspicions of R. Kelly not being the gallant honorable man he was portraying himself to be. In the beginning, Aaliyah's mom chaperoned her when she came to the studio. But because of the long hours in the studio she would get tired, and because Robert was so cunning, she trusted him with her daughter. It was when Aaliyah was out from under her mother. That is when her and Robert would take off and be alone together. A few times I dropped them off at his apartment. No, I didn't say anything to anyone other than me asking Robert what he was doing. He would tell me he was tired and he and Aaliyah were going to chill for an hour or so before going back to work. I need to work with her, Aaliyah, on her vocals in a private setting, he would tell me. Much as I wanted to, I couldn't come right out and tell anyone of my suspicions. What if I was wrong? I never saw what went on behind closed doors. R. Kelly was my boy, and there was no telling how Mike or Barry would react if he found out Robert was possibly sleeping with his teenage daughter. As I stood there talking to Mike, I tried to give him a hinting suggestion indicating that he should not allow Aaliyah to record late at night. I told him to tell R. Kelly and Barry that he wanted Aaliyah to record in the daytime and that he wasn't comfortable with her being out at night. I also told him R. Kelly would change his schedule around to accommodate Aaliyah. Mike was not listening and did not heed to my push to get him to do the right thing for his daughter. He felt the hours were what brought the best out of R. Kelly, and if he changed things, it would interfere with R. Kelly's creativity. I told Mike, man, Robert is unbelievable with his music. He creates it all the time. It's who he is. It's what he does. I said that in hopes of Mike feeling comfortable in stepping in to pull Aaliyah out. But with Mike's confidence and trust in Robert, I felt I wasn't getting through. And I let it go at that. I didn't press on any further. I said all I could say. I felt I was telling him in so many words to pull Aaliyah out and insist things run according to the way he wanted it to go. I even made a point of mentioning what I would do if it was my daughter. We were both saying one thing but really focusing on another. I was focused on staying in good to keep my job and money circulating, while Mike was watching his daughter fulfill a dream. Aaliyah was having fun shooting her first video, and I believe for her and for her family, sharing that moment with her friends and family was priceless. Everybody's focus turned to Aaliyah, and we were intrigued by the hype of the video and the next step in her career. R. Kelly spent a lot of time charming the family. I let it go because I hadn't seen anything other than something that didn't look right. To suspect and actually tell on someone just because something didn't look right didn't mean it wasn't right. And to set myself out and accuse someone on assumption, I wasn't ready to do that. I give out indications and subliminal hints to my suspicions, and that was all I could do. At this point I hadn't seen anything. Nobody else seemed to see anything out of the ordinary, and what I was thinking I saw was as clear as daylight. Who am I? No one was listening to me. I wasn't important. So I let it go. Besides, Aaliyah and her family were going back to Detroit after the shoot anyways. I had a family to feed, and I needed to get my mind set on the upcoming Salt and Peppa tour. That was going to be an experience all by itself. Chapter 18. The New Crew. Larry Hood was R. Kelly's personal friend who started out with us. He was who I thought had earned the position, and he would have been the help needed to take this to a Barbara Streisand, Rod Stewart level in music. That is the talent of R. Kelly. But Larry wasn't okay with everything that went on. Man, Johnny. What's going on, man, with Robert and these girls? Man, how old is them girls? He'd ask me. I told him that I was not there to check ids. Larry would look at me out of the top or from the side of his glasses and tell me, man, now you know I'm going to have to sit him down on this. Man, because you know I can't get into nothing like that. He was observing how things had grown since the last time he had traveled along with us. Over a period of time, R. Kelly even fought that system by telling Tyree he worked for him and that his obligation was to him first. I'm the one paying your salary, not Demetrius. Chapter 19. Trippin. R. Kelly wasn't smiling this time. He shook my hand and pulled me towards him. Johnny, man, Aaliyah's in trouble, and I got to get her. Johnny, I need you to get us a flight to Chicago after this show, he said. I was disturbed at the thought that Aaliyah was in trouble. What do you mean Aaliyah's in trouble? Rob? I asked. She ran away from home, he said. What was going on, I thought to myself. He was still dressing while he was talking, putting the last of his clothes on. He was talking low and fast, trying to give me instructions on what to do. It was time for him to go on stage. What? Where is she at? I asked. She's still in Detroit, but I need for you to get her a plane ticket to Chicago and get her a room in a hotel. I've got to call Daryl and let him know what's going on, he said. Do you want me to call Barry and see if he knows anything? I asked. I was truly concerned. However, when I mentioned Barry, R. Kelly became disconcerted. No, we can't do that, Johnny. Don't call Barry, he said. You need to get us back to Chicago right after this show. She needs me, man, and I need to be there for her. It's a lot more to it than you know, and I'll tell you. But right now don't call Barry. Get us to Chicago right after this show. Johnny, man, I need for you to do that. All right, man, he asked as he stepped onto the lift that was taking him up to the stage. I knew that something wasn't right about this. But what was I to do? I had to follow the directions my boss gave me and make reservations for us to get to Chicago. All kind of things were going through my head. What kind of mess is going on, and what am I getting myself into? With Aaliyah being Barry's niece, I couldn't understand why R. Kelly didn't want to contact Barry, especially since she ran away from home. I thought Rob and Barry were close. Calling Barry Hankerson should have been the first thing he should have wanted to do. I shouted out as R. Kelly was going up on the stage lift. Rob, who else do you want to go? Quote, me, you, and Tyree, he shouted back. We were going to have to finish this conversation later. What the heck's going on? I thought to myself. I was tired and mentally drained from doing a little of everything. With the tour just starting and with yet more unfinished things I needed to do, I made sure I took care of Rob's personal needs. I was gonna have to be up for another 4 hours calculating the expenditures for the tour thus far. And now with R. Kelly's implemented drama, it looked as if it would be at the minimum 24 hours before I would be able to get any rest. It's always something coming up out of nowhere with Rob. It was like he had to know just how much he could get into and get away with. As I dialed the numbers to the airport, I thought this newfound power he had made him feel invincible. The saying, "No rest for the weary," was a reality in my life. I had to arrange for Aaliyah to pick up a prepaid ticket in Detroit to go to Chicago on the red-eye flight with a return flight to Miami for the following night, getting us back in time for the scheduled show. It was going to be a long 24 hours for me. I was a guardian angel to this boy, but I was getting tired. A guru was not the position I wanted with this boy. He was in another world. A world that didn't consist with caring for the people who were in his life. Everything was coming to a boil and he was putting his hand in the water. I had a feeling that sooner or later he was going to see just how scorching hot the water was. After the show I had a limo take us to the airport. On the flight, R. Kelly and I sat together. He talked to me a little, but for the most part he wanted to be left alone to clear his mind and think about things. I knew that he was not trying to hear anything I had to say that was against what he was going to Chicago to do. As I looked over at him sitting with his mind off in space, freely surrendering to his inner pain with tears dropping down his face, he reminded me of a lonely kid. I wanted to help. I wanted him to do the right thing. I felt R. Kelly was alone in this matter. He came to me in the heat of battle and wanted me to jump right into the fire. I thought sometimes I was the only one who truly cared for R. Kelly. It seemed like everyone else working in R. Kelly's camp had a nonchalant disposition towards the complaints and rumors. Oh well, we're just going to have to deal with it and do what we can. Even though I was starting to feel like an alienated hired hand, I continued to show Rob that I truly cared for him and his well-being. I wanted him to know I was there for him no matter what. R. Kelly wouldn't let me in on the heart of the matter. Ever since the money started coming in, it seemed like the more he made the further apart we were. It seemed like he distanced himself away from where we came from. We were an hour into our flight when the flight attendants came to serve the peanuts, coffee and sodas. Rob got his coffee, but continued with that same look on his face as if he had lost his best friend. A lot was on his mind. As I poured the sugar into my coffee, I told him, "It's gon' be alright, Rob. We gon' get it right. I think she's pregnant," he said, in a voice that sounded as if he wanted to bust out in tears. "Oh man, Rob," was all I could say at the time. Man, my mind was totally confused. I was somewhat angry and at the same time I wanted to protect R. Kelly. I just kept saying man over and over. He went on to tell me that Daryl McDavid arranged for a car to pick Aaliyah up at O'Hare Airport, and she had a hotel room available on arrival. This was crazy. How were we going to get through this without causing ill feelings with Barry? I thought, this was all disrespectful to Barry and Aaliyah's family. Then I thought about how R. Kelly betrayed Craig Hodges' trust with actions that led us all to assume that he had been with his wife. I thought R. Kelly had a bit more sense and respect for Barry Hankerson and his family and would not violate their trust. I thought they were really closer than that. I felt R. Kelly could go to Barry with anything. Barry loved Robert and treated him like a son, and I know Aaliyah's family, Mike and Diane, trusted Rob. This was all bad. I wanted Rob to know that I was with him. But at the same time, I didn't want to be totally submissive so that he felt like I was condoning what was happening. I wanted this to turn out right, and I wanted Robert to do what was right. "Rob, I think you should call Barry and talk to him about this, man. Barry loves you, man. And he knows you love Aaliyah. What other way is there, Robert?" I asked as the plane was making its descent into Chicago's O'Hare Airport. "I can't call Barry, Johnny," he said sadly. Daryl said that he spoke to a lawyer who said that in order for me not to go to jail, I would have to marry Aaliyah man. So that's what I need to do, he said as if he had no vision at all to try seeing things rationally. How you gon' marry Aaliyah, Rob? I asked in bitter sadness. I wanted him to really think about what he was saying. Aaliyah was a baby. I was stunned and hurt that this had happened. I had asked Robert once before if he was messing with Aaliyah and he said no. I had hoped that he had told me the truth. Now, it was a fact. This grown-ass man had been messing with Aaliyah all the time. This was crazy and I knew right away that it was going to cause separation throughout the whole camp. Just when things were looking like a brighter day was just ahead. Here came another problem. Who's gonna take care of her while we're out on the road, Rob? Aaliyah still gotta go to school, man, I told him. I was angry. I wanted him to step back to really look at what he was talking about doing. Rob turned around towards me. His facial expression showed that he was offended with my statement. He became imprudent, in a soft tone as he snapped at me. Look, Johnny man, I don't need you in my head because I'm doing this. You're either with me or against me, he said. I took it as if he were giving me an ultimatum. I knew what he was implying. You don't realize it, but man, you don't know it all, Johnny, he empathized in order to clear up the threat up he had just imposed on me. That idle threat he made drew a line for me. I was against it, but at the same time I had mouths to feed. I was nowhere near being financially secure enough to consider myself off the street. To stop right now would put me back on the streets. R. Kelly had lawyers. I didn't know what Daryl McDavid had going on, but I was going to have to talk to him. I thought as I stood shaking my head, feeling dejected. R. Kelly wanted an answer. Well, Johnny man, where you at with me? He asked. I felt beaten and trapped into taking on a deep feeling of iniquity. I tucked my chin to my chest. Man, I'm with you, man. I'm just saying though, Rob, in a final appeal, looking at him with a look that said it was a stupid idea. I don't know, but we gon' have to get it done, he answered with a confused look on his face. I thought Daryl and whoever was associating with R. Kelly had poisoned the boy's mind. Rob had changed into a whole other person. The humility he portrayed no longer glimmered of pride. R. Kelly had lost his respect. I began to look at him, question his morals and wonder if he had any. This was crazy and I knew it. Here I was in the middle of some no-brainer, dumb stuff. I did not want to do this. These situations kept arising, changing the course in the direction I wanted my life to go. But at the same time I felt as if I had to hold on to my job. This was my dilemma. This was my stress. Along with helping to raise Robert, I could not seem to bring balance to my life. Here I was holding on to something that in the end could leave me alone. Struggling to pull myself up again and leaving me to have to start all over again to rebuild my life. I didn't want to be a part of this. This was crazy. I wanted to stand on my own, be able to break away. But Rob kept a rope dangling that I kept holding onto. I couldn't let go of the rope now. I was not on level ground. Frustrated and thinking, here I go again, straightening up his mess. If he would only allow me to do my job, we would not be in this situation. But no. Our administration had Mr. R. Kelly believing they had an answer for anything he might get himself into. I strongly believed whoever was filling Rob's head with the idea that marrying Aaliyah would make this right wasn't someone that was truly in his corner and looking out with his best interest at heart. Nonetheless, it was a deep wound for many, and not one that was going to heal without leaving a scar. With this happening, I knew it would probably eliminate me from being Aaliyah's tour manager as well. And working for Aaliyah and R. Kelly would have made life a whole lot better for me. But now, my dreams were being shattered. It was after midnight when we arrived in Chicago. We took a cab to the Sheraton Hotel a few miles from the airport where Aaliyah had a deluxe suite. Room 300 to 313. One of those extended rooms. When Aaliyah opened the door, she looked at me as if she was asking, "Am I doing the right thing?" I wanted so bad to tell her to go home. But R. Kelly was standing right in front of me. I felt I had done what I could. No one paid any attention to me. No one saw me. It was my business. But yet, not my business. R. Kelly immediately took Aaliyah to the bedroom, while Tyree and I remained in the living room until he returned 45 minutes later. I spoke to Daryl. We were to meet first thing the next morning at his office on 12th Street in Wabash. For that night I went to my sister Didi's home in Harvey, Illinois. It was another rare moment for me to spend some time with my daughter. At 7:30 the next morning I met Daryl at his office. Daryl McDavid was R. Kelly's personal business manager. He was handling all of Robert's money as well as all of his affairs now since Barry was no longer in the picture. Daryl is a white guy who wants to be black. I wasn't in a good mood in his office. I let him know that I was not in agreement with R. Kelly marrying Aaliyah. "Daryl, man, you know this ain't right. I've already told Rob how I felt. And I feel that you supposed to tell him too, man. That's what's wrong with Rob, man. Nobody is letting him know when he's wrong. Everybody's looking over everything he does and he's getting reckless. He's thinking his money will get him out of everything, making him think his shit don't stink." I was ferocious as I explained to Daryl how I felt. I wanted him to take a stand with me to convince R. Kelly that marrying Aaliyah was not the right thing to do. Daryl felt that in R. Kelly's association with Aaliyah, he had committed a felony offense, and he felt that the only way to protect R. Kelly was to help him do whatever needed to be done to get them married. He didn't agree with me involving Barry as part of the solution. He felt it would give Barry something to use against R. Kelly and in turn give him more control over R. Kelly's career and finances. That whole thing was stupid to me. But Daryl didn't want to hear any reasoning. I had a feeling there was something else going on that I was not going to be let in on. It was crazy. We drove to the hotel where Rob and Aaliyah were staying, picked them up, and then we drove around City Hall in Maywood, Illinois to investigate what we would need in order to get a marriage license. They weren't asking for much at all. Basically, 3 pieces of ID and a state ID showing that Aaliyah was 18 years old. When we left there, we went back to the hotel to put together a plan to make sure this marriage would happen. I was still wishing I could call Barry so he could help us fix this the right way. Maybe things would have been different had I walked away from this a long time ago. Maybe I should have continued with my efforts and desire to be an entertainer. I believed in an artist who didn't think anything of me. Although I was opposed to everything that was going on, I still had to assist in this effort to make sure R. Kelly and Aaliyah were married. I knew a lady that worked at the public aid office. She was in charge of taking the photos for I.D.'s when people were approved to receive welfare, so I went to see her and took Aaliyah with me. Aaliyah waited in the car while I went to talk to my friend to get her to do me a favor. I already told Daryl and Rob it might be possible to get my friend to give Aaliyah a state ID. But it might cost, they told me, to make it happen and not worry about the cost after negotiating a fee of $500. I took Aaliyah into the office where she took a photo ID stating her name, birth date, and a year that showed that she was 18. This was our first proof of identification, and it was an official state of Illinois ID card. R. Kelly also knew someone who worked for FedEx, who would allow her to say that she worked for FedEx. So, we were able to get 2 IDs in Jewtown. And on top of that, Aaliyah had a school ID card. With the 3 forms of IDs, we were able to obtain a marriage license for Robert Sylvester Kelly and Aaliyah Houghton to be married. Once this was done, R. Kelly had another friend who knew a preacher who performed the ceremony. After they were married, we left Rob and Aaliyah alone for a few hours. Our time was limited because we had to board the plane in order to get to Miami in time for the show. I was angry at myself and disgusted at R. Kelly and Daryl. Right before it was time for us to leave, R. Kelly called me back up to the room. Once up there he asked me if I thought he should let Aaliyah go to his condo over at the Lake Point Towers. I posed the question to him I had in Orlando. Who's going to look after her? Aaliyah still has to go to school, I told him. The best and safest thing to do is to send her back home. We still have 6 weeks left to be on the road. You can't expect for her to stay locked in the house all that time alone. What about when we get back and have to get ready to go overseas? Let Aaliyah go home, Rob. She's your wife now. Time will fix the rest of it. R. Kelly exhaled and shook his head from side to side. There was a look of sadness in his eyes. He looked exhausted. I imagined his thoughts were traveling 1,000 miles a minute. Finally, he responded, "You're right, Johnny. I've gotta send her home," as he began to cry. What did I do, man? Was the question he asked himself as he sobbed like a broken man, deep in sorrow. As I stood looking at him, I wondered to myself, if R. Kelly talked with Barry, would Barry be able to forgive him? After all, Barry and Robert were always on the phone with each other and I felt they formed a special bond. You married her, Rob, and that was an honorable thing to do. A bit premature, but nonetheless, you're showing you mean well. I didn't know what I was saying, but I felt sorry for him. I know I'd want to kick his ass disrespecting me and my family, but by me being Robert's right hand. Man, I was trying to get Robert to feel we could somehow make some sense out of what he did and make it easy for him to make better decisions. It seemed I had his attention and he was listening, so I pressed a little more. I still think you should talk to Barry about this, Rob. Before I said another word, I had to take sudden notice to the fear he had as his eyes when I mentioned Barry. He began to wipe his falling tears from his face before he could speak. I reiterated my statement to make sure he did not get mad, but talking to Barry is totally up to you, Rob. It doesn't matter. I'm going to be right here with you, all the way through. However, if it comes out. R. Kelly just sat in total silence. He was numb to what was being said. Looking into his eyes, he looked far away as if lost in another world. How was I going to help? I was just as confused as he was. I felt only God could fix this. I kept telling myself, God can fix this. R. Kelly and I struggled a long time together. We had been through a lot together and now I was his true partner in crime. I was hurt over this as well. I had so much admiration for Aaliyah and her family and I felt I had let them down too. I don't know, maybe I was just putting myself in it. I asked myself the question, what would you do? I went back to my old way of doing things. When times get hard and things seemed really rough, I prayed. Praying always brings me peace. I wasn't feeling Daryl McDavid and all his big-shot lawyer friends that I had never met. My young friend I brought up from Chicago was in deep worry and trouble. And his financial advisor was telling him he could buy his way out instead of calling a meeting amongst men. Yeah, everyone had created a monster. They put all this money in this kid's hand and started kissing his ass. Instead of schooling him and teaching him to care for others, they just sat around and watched as he led himself into chaos, allowing him to pout and have his way, knowing all the time all they had to do was threaten to take something away, and Robert, I believe, would have been molded to make better decisions. But in the sight of the people that were making the money, let the truth be told, the artist is just a product. Like Marvin Gaye said, who really cares? Quote, I remember one time, Tyree radioed to me saying that he was down the hall from Robert's suite looking at the police. And they were going into his room. I jumped up straight out of bed. Where is Robert? Was the first thing I asked. Me and Big John got him out of the hotel already. He responded. I immediately went up to his room to find out what was going on. Why were the police in R. Kelly's suite? Tyree was telling me that R. Kelly had invited a monster to his room. Those were the words he used in describing a girl they had been entertaining. I just shook my head. This boy was crazy. Man, Johnny, this girl was so ugly and nasty. Man, I don't know why dude even had her up there. Man, if I would have bought a dick already hard to use on her, it would have gone soft, ugly as she was, Tyree said of the girl they had in the room. Come to find out, after she had left the room, she had gotten hold to one of our itineraries and gave that to the police in hopes of identifying who was there in the room with her. She said she had been raped. My main concern was Robert. Where was he? Tyree said he had already put him on his bus. His reason for calling me was because Robert had sent him to get me and R. Kelly's bus driver. We began to walk and talk. With the police in the room, I figured the safest thing to do now was to get R. Kelly onto the next city. I was walking with the driver going through the lobby of the hotel when I saw Clive Calder, CEO of Jive Records, and a few other Jive reps appear. Granted, we had just finished doing a show earlier that evening. Clive and his guest were there to pay Robert a visit. Once Clive found out something was going on involving R. Kelly with the hotel he went to investigate. Tyree and I went along with them to check things out too. The girl had named everyone on the list as to the people she said were involved. She also pointed Tyree out as one of the persons involved. At that point of identification, Tyree went through a series of questions, and because he was there, and I guess because he would not admit to anyone else being there, Tyree was arrested for rape. He spent a week on Rikers Island, New York City's Department of Corrections. I later heard that Rock, another posse friend of Robert's, who was there that night, he had taken pictures of them all in the room with the girl. The pictures, along with the attorneys R. Kelly had behind Tyree. He was able to walk out from under the ugly monster girl's lies. On the night of that incident, I got a chance to once again talk with Mr. Clive Calder. He was very concerned about Robert. He too told me that I needed to stay with Robert. He felt it was a phase Robert was going through, but he insisted that Robert needed to have good people like me around him to protect him. I agreed with him and I appreciated his compliment, but at the same time I let him know that it was not Robert, but that it was his posse who were bringing the girls around. Everybody in the whole administration saw how Rob was living. I remember Clive Calder coming to me on a few occasions asking me if I could talk to Robert and stay close to him in hopes of helping him to see he needed to tone it down with the young ladies. As Clive would say, I even mentioned to Mr. Calder, "Tell Robert what it is you want him to stop doing." "Shoot, man," I said. "Tell Robert you won't release his single if he continues the nonsense in messing with underage girls." I let Mr. Calder know that it was not Robert, but that it was his posse who was bringing the girls around. But he turned his head as well. It was about making sure Robert was happy so that he could produce good music and the rest. Well, that's where the damage control department came in. In my opinion, Mr. Calder turned his head on Robert as well as everyone did. It was about making sure Robert was happy so that he could produce good music. They could make tons of money and the rest. Well, that's where the damage control department came in at. I was pretty much the only one that halfway stood up to Robert. And for me, I didn't want to be distant from my friend, Robert, so I was hesitant as well in expressing to him fully what I thought. R. Kelly was a young kid gone wild. Heck, I don't know how I would have been had I been in his shoes. I didn't know the full story of his life and all that he had been through that made him who he was. All I know is no one stepped in to say, "This can't happen." People pretended they didn't see and others they boosted him on. I just don't see where anything is one man's fault. In my opinion, we are all a product of our environment. I believe we all can give a little more of caring and in being our brother's keeper. By Nichiren Daishonin. The powerful may appear great, but in reality, they are not. Greatest of all are the ordinary people. If those in power lead lives of idle luxury, it is because the people are silent. We have to speak out with impassioned words. We need to resolutely attack abuses of power that can cause people suffering. This is fighting on the side of justice. It is wrong to remain silent when confronted with injustice. Doing so is a tantamount to supporting and condoning evil. Chapter 20. Moving On. This was a turning point in my life. It was one thing wanting to take on the responsibilities to be R. Kelly's representative with a devoted drive and with heart. To be his front man and keep the way clear for him. Watching the crowd to make sure no one could get to him and cover his back. I was the man behind the man, but I was tired of living as if he was the man behind me. I was angry at R. Kelly. He just was not cool. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening or what was going to happen. God was doing a lot of revealing. Robert was showing his true self. After all the drama I went through with him, I was right back in Chicago in the same boat. Robert was always finding ways to get himself caught up in something. And every time, it was because he was inconsiderate and selfish, and every time, I was right there for him. Things were not going smooth at all. It was as if something evil coming from out of nowhere would always find its way in the mix of things in my life and send my life into shambles. Sometimes I think I see someone sitting back laughing at me. The way things should have been and the way things were only pieces of a dream. I could not seem to put the pieces together. I wanted to wake up and be able to go home to my family. I asked myself, when were things going to start going right for me in my life? I was standing there on the 36th floor of Robert's apartment and found myself wiping tears from my own eyes. I looked over at Robert. He was holding his head in his hands, and I was thinking, if the possibility of serving time in jail was at the top of his list of worries, then he should have been really worried. I walked over to Rob. I wanted to lift his spirits because we still had to go on. It's gon' be a little hard in the beginning with this, Rob. But we gon' get through it, man. And we gon' get through it together. I told him. I still thought that Rob's best solution was to talk to Barry. There was no getting around him with this. As far as I could see, Barry was still Robert's manager. And let's not forget, he was also Aaliyah's uncle. Now they were related. May as well have the family feud. I thought. Barry Hankerson knew R. Kelly and Aaliyah had something special between the two of them. He watched how joyful and happy Rob and Aaliyah were when they were together. Plus, Barry loved R. Kelly. I remember we were in LA and R. Kelly was performing at the Billboard Awards. Aaliyah and her mom Diane came up from Detroit. The three of them were inseparable. Of course, I was with them, but I was always in the back of them. I was there to accommodate their needs. I was Mr. Kelly's personal assistant. I never looked or suspected that Robert was having an affair with Aaliyah. At least not for a long while. He was older than her, and I took his word that their attraction for each other was their common love for music. But when reality set in and the truth was known, I saw a different picture. What I saw with R. Kelly and Aaliyah, I can only say what I think. It wasn't that I didn't like it. It was just that I knew it wasn't going to turn out right. I knew the timing was all off for them two to be a couple. I don't think you can help who you love. In my opinion, I think Robert Kelly loved Aaliyah, and, in my opinion, again, I think Aaliyah loved him too. Sure, she was young in age, but she was ahead of her age in so many ways. Aaliyah, in my opinion, possessed a spirit of joy, fun and happiness that was all together, and you could feel that when you were in her presence. She was a princess who wanted everybody to be happy. I wanted Robert to talk to Barry. It was the right thing to do. So I asked him, How you gon' deal with Barry without dealing with him honestly? Rob? He is still your manager. I was hoping he'd talk to me and be open to listen to me. But he wasn't. He was sold with the plan that Daryl and his lawyer friends had. That was the way he was going to follow. Standing, looking out of the window on the 36th floor of Rob's condo, I could hear my mama's words like it was clear as daylight. You can cover something up, and it will be unseen for the moment. But as soon as you uncover it, whatever was there will still be there. The truth don't change, baby, and because of that what's in the dark will come to the light, she would say with a sympathetic look on her face, shaking her head from side to side. I smiled at the thought of my mother. It was almost time to leave. We had to make it back to Miami, so Robert and I left his apartment and went back to Aaliyah's hotel room. When I told him how much time we had before we would have to leave, he spent the few minutes we had with Aaliyah. It was time to go. Rob, come on, man. It's time to go, I yelled to him. 10 minutes later, he came out of the room again with tears falling down his face. On the way to the airport, he talked on the phone with Daryl, telling him to arrange for Aaliyah to get home. I was relieved. She was going home. Robert had told me Aaliyah wasn't going to say anything to her parents about the marriage. But I knew better than that. When we got back to Miami, we weren't missed, and no one knew we had been to Chicago and back. A life-changing event had taken place in a 24-hour period. We got back in time for the show. In spite of being tired, I went through the normal pass and checking of the stage props, making sure everyone was on point. That night, R. Kelly put on a super performance. I wondered where he had gotten the energy from. I was fatigued, and I looked forward to after the show so I could get some rest. I thought about Aaliyah. I wondered what she was doing and how she was holding herself up. After the show, I sought refuge in my hotel room bed. I did check in on Robert before retiring for the night. It seemed he didn't have any worries, or at least he had found a way to hide what he was going through. Back at the hotel, Robert had a big party going on. I thought he should have been missing his new wife and worried about her, but as it appeared to me, he was having a time of his life. Nonetheless, I let it be known I was not going to be disturbed anymore that night. At checkout time the next morning, as everyone was boarding the bus, I went up to Robert's room to check in on him. Tyree was in there with him. When I walked in the door, Tyree shook his head in disgust as if R. Kelly was having a pity party with himself. "What's up with it, Rob? You ready to get out of here?" I asked in high spirits, wanting to pick his spirits up as well. "Yeah, I'm ready. Is everybody else already on the bus?" he asked. When I asked him how things were with Aaliyah, he wasn't too talkative, and for the next few days, it was like that. Robert stayed to himself. Any and everything about Aaliyah was now confidential. Things were changing. Barry hadn't called me either, and normally he would have called to check on us. When I told Robert the first had to call Barry about the video crew wanting additional money to transport the equipment to the next city, he told me to call Daryl. He said whatever I needed to talk to Daryl about it. Barry was still his manager, but he was dealing with Daryl McDavid now concerning the tour business. We continued our tour, and things hadn't changed in regard to R. Kelly and the group. When it came to them being snobbish in relation to Salt and Peppa. Our last date with Salt and Peppa was Halloween in Buffalo, New York. Throughout the whole night, we celebrated the end of the tour during and after Salt and Peppa's performance. R. Kelly didn't join us. He entertained his guests in the dressing room. Public announcement. The dancers, the band, Cheryl Cobb, Salt and Peppa, as well as Spinderella, their whole crew, and me were all having what James Brown called a funky good time. This was really the first time we had all come together and socialized. We had a blast. I ate so many lobsters that night, my hands started clawing. That night was filled with fun. When we got home, the drama over Aaliyah began. Rob was on the phone with me constantly. "Where are you, Johnny? I need you with me, man." Aaliyah told her family about the marriage, he said. I had already figured she would. I knew Aaliyah couldn't hold back from her mother what she had done. She needed her mother. In my book, they needed each other. In the meantime, I looked at my career. This had hurt me too. I knew working with Aaliyah in any way was out of the question. My chance to branch out and build a career was damaged. 13 years now, I have been a personal assistant to Robert. He was sitting passively on 6 figures. And I was again wondering if I would have a job next week. Everything was coming through Daryl's office now that Robert had separated himself from dealing with Barry. Once again, I took on more responsibilities. After the family found out about the marriage, Rob told me they had the marriage annulled and Rob went into a depression. I didn't question Rob about him and Aaliyah anymore. He didn't want to go home to his apartment in Lake Point Towers. All I knew is that he was hurt over the fact that he was not able to speak to or see Aaliyah. Daily he would call me to book him a room at the Nico Hotel on Canal Street in Chicago. If and when I would have to go pick him up, I would notice he hadn't slept in his bed at all. Rob was sleeping in his closet. He said the darkness took him away from everything. For years I had been holding to this dream of success in the music business. And with Barry being gone, I felt Rob would now need me more. And maybe now an opportunity would present itself for Robert to pay me. It was Rob on the phone. I knew he would call. But I was hoping he wouldn't because things were going so smoothly. The year before, I had spent Christmas with Rob, Barry, Aaliyah and Diane in LA. This Christmas, I could tell in his voice as he spoke over the phone that he was lonely. He wanted for me to ride with him to go shopping and buy gifts for Aaliyah and her family. He was hoping the spirit of Christmas could engender some compassion. I thought Rob must have thought that it was a small thing he had done. When I told him I was in Charlotte, he asked me, "You're in Charlotte? Where you at? What street is that on?" He asked. "I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina," I told him. "I'm here spending the holidays with my family." "I told you that," I reminded him. "Yeah, but I didn't know it was out of town." He sounded disappointed yet somewhat sarcastic at the same time. However, he didn't lose his focus. Contrary to my being out of town, "Well, I need to send Aaliyah and Diane something. There's a mall down there, ain't it?" he asked. He was talking to me in a tone where he was giving me a job assignment. "Can you get to a mall there?" he asked without giving me a chance to respond. Remorsefully he said, "You can pick them out some things for me. Johnny man, I know they hurt, but it's Christmas. I just gotta reach out to let them know they're in my heart. I just gotta show them I love them. I just wish they understood. You know what I mean." In his voice, I heard loneliness. The reality, however, was that this was his burden. He had brought this on himself. I couldn't feel sorry for him. "I don't know, Rob," I told him. "You don't think you should just let some time heal the situation?" I asked. He was persistent with sending them gifts. So I agreed to do his shopping for him. I had to go to the mall anyway to do my own Christmas shopping. When I talked to Robin about R. Kelly's idea to send Aaliyah and her family gifts, she didn't think I was serious until she heard me on the phone with my sister Dee Dee and my brother-in-law Lenny. I was checking with them first to see if they wanted to spend their Christmas making a Christmas delivery and making some money. R. Kelly wanted the gifts to arrive at Aaliyah's house on the morning of Christmas. I had 3 days to get this done. I hired my sister and her husband to drive the gifts from their home in Harvey, Illinois. Once they received the package from FedEx, they were to head to Detroit and arrive at Aaliyah's house in the early morning hours. When I got off the phone after making the arrangements for R. Kelly's Christmas delivery, Robin said to me. You're serious, aren't you? I can't believe R. Kelly could think a gift could ease the pain Aaliyah's mother is probably going through. I believe he's really got issues he needs to talk about, she said as she scooted down on the sofa, stretching out and laying her beautiful head on my shoulder. Later that evening, Robin, the kids and I all went to the mall. It was fun being in North Carolina with Robin. I even daydreamed about staying there with her. It felt so tempting, but I had to dismiss that thought. Things just weren't going right in the organization I was with. Walking, talking and holding hands with Robin. Watching my children be happy. No, forget it. It just can't happen. Things weren't going good enough for me to put into this relationship what we needed to make it. I had to be able to provide for her and the children. I didn't have a plan in place to make that happen. Robin tried thinking of something special to get for Aaliyah and her family. But because we couldn't make sense of even buying gifts, she picked out a lot of teddy bears for Aaliyah and sweaters and scarves for her mom and dad. It's 0 degrees in Detroit anyway, Robin said. We left the mall in a hurry. I had to rush from the mall to get to FedEx before they closed. Everything had to be shipped out that night in order for the shipment to arrive on time for Christmas. We got to FedEx just in time. I knew that I was free for the remainder of the holidays and Robert knew I was not available. Once back at the house, I called my sister to let her know FedEx would deliver the package to her the next day. My sister said R. Kelly was a screwball for sending gifts. However, she was quick to take the job of making sure the gifts got there. She was being paid $800 to make a 10-hour drive. Dee Dee and Lenny just had to hire a babysitter. Besides, we provided the gas and a rental van. All they had to do was to get the gifts there and set them in front of the door. Later the next evening I spoke to my sister. She told me they delivered the gifts to the house, took everything out the truck, set everything in front of the house and then rang the doorbell. Aaliyah's dad answered and asked who the packages were from, but my sister said she just gave them a card and told him they were just making a delivery. They told him Merry Christmas and left. I later found out that Aaliyah's parents sent the gifts back to Chicago, to Daryl McDavid's office. Chapter 21. Nothing seems to change. I was very upset at R. Kelly for the jealousy he portrayed regarding me driving Daryl's car. I felt like when I made an appearance around people, it was a reflection of him, making him look good. He did not see it that way. He was on some other ego trip. He had to be the only one in our posse to shine. It was always about his selfish ambition or conceited attitude. He was never willing to consider the needs of others unless there was something in it for him. Nonetheless, I continued working earnestly. I enjoyed the attention I received from the record company and all the other people that sought R. Kelly's services. I was the man to see or talk to in connection with R. Kelly. Even Barry was calling me to talk to me about upcoming events he wanted me to relay to R. Kelly. In spite of the Aaliyah incident, Barry was still R. Kelly's manager and he kept it business. I admire Barry, but then again, who would turn down millions over a sex scandal? Robert wasn't allowed to contact Aaliyah again after the marriage scandal. I think he went through guilt trips treating me the way he did. If I stayed away from him, he would call and talk about how much he missed the old days. He would tell me how he wished he would have listened to me about Aaliyah. I remember right after we came off the road, after the marriage, Robert bought a cell phone for Aaliyah and I sent it to her. It was their secret phone. Later, her family found out. For a long time, Robert wouldn't change his phone number in hopes that one day Aaliyah would call. I remember another time he cried telling me how much he missed her and her mom. For over a month, Rob stayed in the Chicago Nico Hotel and he slept in the closet. He said it was the darkest place he could be. He said he wanted to fall out of the world. I was actually worried about Robert. After 2 weeks he came out of the closet. He was passionate with his desire to get back into the studio. He buried himself into his music and laid down the tracks to the song, Trading My Life, which he wrote for Aaliyah. It was during his time of pain and suffering that I stood close by him. I would overlook his selfish ways and make sure he was okay. But right after the storm was over, he was back to being that fool. Right back to having a faucet attitude. Sure, I wanted to be paid, but it was hard for me to sit back and watch him do things that would really hurt him in the long run. Everyone knew I had Rob's best interest at heart. No one knew him like I did, and I was disoriented over how the closeness R. Kelly and I shared over the years was dwindling away. At times, when Rob was sitting at the piano in the studio, I would walk up to him and ask him to play a song entitled, Hard Times. This was one of the songs he used to sing in the subways. My reason for asking him to sing that song was because it always seemed to bring him back in touch with where we had come from. As he would play and sing, I would join in and sing the background vocals. And together we would go back in time. We would reminisce a little over how far we had come. And I'd tell him, "Look how far you came, Rob. I'm still trying to get there." He didn't want to hear that. And it changed the mood. No longer did the reminiscing have any value to where we had been. Rob and I didn't hang out at all anymore. I didn't feel I was part of his plan any longer. And at the same time, I was trying to maintain my means to support my children. Dilemma after dilemma, I just could not seem to find my way through. Chapter 22, More Drama. I was dealing with loneliness and distress. I was a wandering spirit who was lost with nowhere to hide, and I had nowhere to go that I could call my own. Here I was, a loyal, humble servant working for a person who didn't seem to appreciate me. Even though I believed R. Kelly's talent was an anointing, he was constantly tearing me down. There were always problems occurring that could have been avoided had Robert not been so self-centered. He believed he had control of everything. If I only knew what I know now, I would have been able to project the personal characteristics of his actions in a way that could have made things different. Just as I had been possessed by a demon during my drug addiction in the 80s. Here I was faced with another demon I didn't recognize or know how to deal with. R. Kelly was dealing with a sex demon. This demon made his way into our camp and was working hard at being successful with his job to steal, kill, and to destroy the good that could come out of the gift God had given. The devil's job was to push us away and to keep me struggling to survive while at the same time create havoc in Robert's life. It began with Aaliyah. After that, we went through an interval which brought a chain reaction of negative publicity on R. Kelly and the team of people working with him. Then there came Tiffany, Tia Hawkins. She was one of the young ladies that sung background vocals on Aaliyah's Back and Forth album. She was also one of the young ladies that hung out at Robert's apartment and in the studies with her girlfriends. Tia was a very talented young lady, I might add. I was working with Tia to help her get her career started and had her sign a contract with me as her manager. Robert was messing around with both Tia and Aaliyah at the same time. Tia became disturbed when she learned of R. Kelly and Aaliyah's relationship. This really messed things up because prior to finding this out, Tia was excited about going out on the upcoming tour with Aaliyah after the release of her album. Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. All plans were spoiled when R. Kelly and Aaliyah broke up because Aaliyah's family wanted nothing to do with anyone that had association with R. Kelly. Tia was so angry she sought out to hurt R. Kelly because, as she put it, he a low-down ass dog and I hate him. Among other things. She would call the studio repeatedly, screaming and yelling. R. Kelly got frustrated with her calls and would not take her calls anymore. Then she began to call me, leaving me messages to contact her. I didn't want to be in the middle of her and Robert's business, so I ignored her calls. I continued to ignore Tia until one night, She called and left a message on my phone, crying and saying she was about to kill herself. I contacted Robert immediately to let him hear the message. Call her, he said. I did, and she told me she had a pistol and was going to kill herself. She said she wanted to make Robert hurt for the way he lied to her. She said she didn't feel like she had a future anymore. She said a career as a singer was all she wanted. Tia was hysterical, and she cried into the phone. I asked her to let me come over to talk to her, so she agreed to meet with me. Robert agreed that I should go and meet with her. Go and see if she got a gun, he said. I met with Tia at the corner of 98th and University behind Chicago State University. When I got out of the car, Tia stepped back. I noticed she had something in her hand. I couldn't see it clearly, but as I walked up on her, she put the object I was looking at to her head. It was a small caliber pistol. Tia wasn't joking. She was crying. Y'all think I'm playing, don't you? She sobbed. Y'all, come on. Tia, what are you doing? What's going on with you? Come on, Tia, I said, pleading with her. It was what I felt I had to do when I saw this girl with that pistol. I wanted her to know that I was compassionate to whatever she was going through. I was hoping she would feel that emotion. I came out here for you. You know I always been straight up with you, just like I used to tell you at nights to go home. I always showed you concern like a little sister, I told her. Tia, don't do this. Come on now. Take that gun down. Come on now. Babe, ain't nobody worth you hurting yourself for. Baby girl, I said sympathetically, shocked at the sight of her holding a pistol to her head. I was cautious and concerned for my own life as well. She was not in her right state of mind. I thought, Tia, you don't have to do this, I pleaded. My mind was going fast forward. I was searching for the right words to say to calm her. I didn't want no freak accident happening. What about your son? I asked. That's his baby and he knows it, she said. He don't want nobody else to know it, she continued with tears running down her face. He just lies to me, and now look. Aaliyah can't even talk to me no more. I can't even go on the road with her because of him. I got nothing. He'll feel this, I bet you, she said, rocking back and forth as if she was scared and nervous at the same time. I thought it was over. I thought at that very moment she was going to pull the trigger. I felt so sorry for her. Tia, I shouted, you can make him pay you. Make him pay for you and your son. I told her, you don't have to hurt yourself. You only gon' be hurting your son and your family. Tia, Robert gon' go on doing what they do when you gone. Baby girl, we'll all be sad for a minute. But life gon' goon. Tia, please don't do this. Put that gun down. Tia, please, I begged her. I guess she saw the sincerity in my face as I plead. I felt as if I wanted to cry too. To be honest, I really felt sorry for her. I want him to pay. Johnny, I can't go on tour with Aaliyah now. Her family doesn't want anybody that socializes with him to talk to her. That's my friend, and he was doing her too. I want him to pay, she said, sobbing while the tears ran down her face like drips from a faucet. Tia, you can talk to a lawyer, I told her. Tia, please put the gun down. Please, I begged her. But I want him to hurt. Johnny, I want him to hurt so bad, she said. You could see her pain as she stood there crying. I wanted to just hold her in my arms. She needed to feel love. And I wanted to give it to her. But I wasn't going to walk up on her with that pistol. Tia, he will hurt. He will hurt, babe, and you'll be able to move on with your life if you talk with a lawyer. Please. Tia, I plead with her to put the pistol down from her head. She cried and looked at me. I saw in her eyes that she wanted to give in. I began to slowly walk toward her with my arms shielded out. Come here, Tia. Put that gun down, I said, reaching out to her. I stopped thinking about myself. I was concerned about her. She was in pain and felt all alone. Tia, I'll help you, Just give me the gun, I said. You're just saying that, she said. No, Tia, I'm not. It's not right how he's treated you and that he messed with Aaliyah. When he did that, he messed it up for all of us. I can't work with Aaliyah no more either. I was about to start naming off things that were now affected because we could no longer associate with Aaliyah when Tia interrupted. He doesn't care about nobody, she said with an expression that showed she was mad as hell. You'll be doing him a favor if you hurt yourself. You can come out on top if you get a lawyer. He'll respect you then. Tia, I said. I guess she sensed I was sincere. She began slowly to lower the gun from her head. As I got closer to her, I reached out for the gun and she gave it to me. I put my arms around her and hugged her, patting her like a little baby as she cried in my arms, "Don't worry, Tia. It's gon' be all right. We gon' talk to Robert. And I'll help you. I mean it," I told her. And I did mean it. I felt a need to help her. She laid her head on my shoulder as I put the gun on my waist. I pulled out my cell phone and called. "Robert, you tricked me," she said and snatched away from me. I held on to her with my free hand. "No, I didn't, Tia. But we gotta deal with him," I told her, as I held the phone down, lowering my voice and showing her that I didn't want Robert to hear what I was saying to her. Robert's voice came onto the phone line. "Hello," I spoke into the phone. "Johnny, so what's happening with her?" he asked. I was speaking really low as I told Robert she had the gun. "Man, Tia's hurting," I said. She was still trying to pull away from me but listened intently as I spoke to Robert. "You need to talk to her, Rob. She really feels that you hurt and lied to her," I said. "Where you at?" he asked. "Man, I just talked her out of taking a gun down from her head," I whispered into the phone. Because he acted like he didn't hear me the first time I had told him. He didn't seem concerned at all about that. This angered me. I don't know if he felt the vibe or what all of a sudden. He responded. "What? She got a gun? Let me talk to her," he said. In a low tone, I explained to Robert Tia's state of mind and asked him to be kind to her. At first, she refused to take the phone, but it didn't take too much convincing. She wanted to talk to him. It was no doubt that she was weak for him. "Tia, talk to Robert." She shook her head no. "It's gon' be all right. Tia, talk to him," I insisted, nodding my head to her to take the phone. She then took it, and without hearing anything, she began to yell into the phone. "You just keep lying to me. All you do is hurt people," she screamed into the phone. I sat back on my car as Robert talked to her. After about 5 minutes, she handed the phone back to me. "Yeah, Johnny, bring her down here. I'll deal with her when y'all get here," he said and hung up without giving me a chance to say anything. On the way back to see Robert, Tia told me that it didn't matter that I had her gun. She said the next time she won't call. She said she felt that I was only tricking and lying to her about helping her just like Robert. I talked to her about finding her an attorney. Tia then tried to talk me out of taking her to the studio. She no longer wanted to see Robert. She wanted to go home. But I continued telling her that she needs to face him so that she could clear her head and make up her mind about pursuing an attorney. Once at the studio, I told Robert what had went down regarding the gun. He then took Tia into another part of the studio. I left, taking the .32 pistol with me. Later that night, Robert called me. He was somewhat angry with me for telling Tia to get an attorney. I let him know I felt I had to in order to convince her to give me the gun. He didn't believe she was really going to shoot herself. But I believed different and didn't want to take a chance on that happening. I didn't hear from Tia for a couple of weeks. Then I received a call from her attorney, who wanted to meet with me to discuss Tia's allegations concerning Robert having sex with her as a minor. I went to meet with him to find out what I could so that I could warn Robert and he could prepare himself. I didn't think that the girl was really going to follow up on my suggestion to obtain legal counsel. But she did. It later turned out to be a real case against R. Kelly. Tia told the attorney of all the times she and her young friends had spent with R. Kelly at his Burnham Plaza apartment. She told of all the sexual things he had done with her and her friends at the apartment and at the studio. She even mentioned Aaliyah's name at some sleepovers. Several lawsuits were filed against R. Kelly by Tia and her friends. Tia offered me 10% of whatever she would get if I would sign an affidavit. But I declined. I am still trying to figure out myself. Why? After several attempts of trying to convince me to sign an affidavit, Tia and her attorney stopped calling me. Later, I learned that R. Kelly settled with them as well as Aaliyah and her family. R. Kelly wanted to go to trial with Tia but was advised to end the scandal before it got out of hand. We felt that Tia and her little friends collaborated together to come up with a story to damage R. Kelly and his career. Nonetheless, it stopped nothing. We continued working and moving ahead. Working with R. Kelly was my life. I was sure we could somehow recover from all the bad publicity that had been printed about R. Kelly. I felt and told Robert that the show and image had to be different. But he didn't listen. He continued on in his shows, running across the stage, holding his private parts and grinding fans, instead of just singing and touching the people with his voice. Meanwhile, I made another attempt to negotiate the 5% pay I was promised years ago. I had an attorney draw up a contract for me and then I presented it to Daryl. Because Daryl had begun to take over a lot of the business matters when it came to Robert since he and Barry were not speaking. He read over it and felt it was fair for me to receive a percentage. As initially agreed, you've been the man behind him even before me. And I know I depend on you. It would be hell for me if you weren't here, he told me. Daryl told me that he submitted the contract to Robert and that after the tour we would sit down and work it out. You would think with all the negative publicity from Tia, her friends and Aaliyah, that he would have learned something or would have grown up at least a little. He didn't. That sex demon had a hold on R. Kelly and he was blind to the damage he was causing to his career and in the lives of the people that loved him. He knew I would object to anything I thought was hindering his career. So instead of conversing with me, he tried to hide everything from me. He even had the security I hired for him keep me from entering his dressing room. Hold on, Demetrius. Mr. Kelly wants me to check with him before I allow anyone to go in to see him. To say I was frustrated would be an understatement. I was fighting to protect someone who didn't have any idea what he was doing. I was mad as hell when he wouldn't allow me into Robert's dressing room. But I chilled. I allowed him to do his job. When he came back to the door, he told me, Mr. Kelly said he would see you later. What? Man, I need to see Rob now. Excuse me, I told him. When I attempted to get past him to enter Robert's dressing room, he put his hands on me to stop me. One word led to another to where I was about to hit him in the head with my walkie-talkie. Robert came out the dressing room just in the nick of time to stop me from getting in a lot of trouble because I was really mad, and if I would have busted him in the head, I was going to jail. I thought Kim was going to work with me as Tyree did. This is what we had talked about before I hired him. Robert came out the dressing room and stepped in the middle of us. Hold on, Johnny man. What's going on? I told him to not let anybody in here. He's doing what I told him, Robert said, seeming angry at me for causing a confrontation. Robert, man, he don't stop me. I'm your main guy. I don't know what's going on in there. Pointing to his dressing room. Shit, you could be in trouble or something. He don't keep me out without you telling me. I was angry and Rod heard it in my voice as well as he was looking at me as I was looking Kim up and down. I should be one of the only ones that can come in here and see you and be able to have full access. to get to you with no problem. I don't know what's going on with this dude. Pointing at Kim, telling me I can't go in. I said to him with a smug look at Kim. Robert then told me to come into the dressing room where we went over the issue and talked about some promotional things he had to do, but overall the situation with locking me out of his dressing room. He asked me to work with him on that. After I left Robert's dressing room, I told Kim he would not be with us long. Yeah, whatever, he said. We did 2 more cities before Robert allowed me to fire Kim. Kim, I felt, was doing too much to get close to Robert. What he didn't know was that Robert and I were together regardless of how things appeared. R. Kelly's brother, Carrie Killa Kelly, was out on tour with us during this time. He was a rapper and was part of the show, so he stayed around R. Kelly since they started working together. Robert and Killa clashed a lot. They didn't see eye to eye when it came to Killa flowing on the tracks and gaining his identity as a rapper. Robert wanted to dictate how he should be rapping. He wanted to mold Killa to be how he wanted him to be, and Killa had a style of his own. He was well liked and respected by other rappers. Killa was complimented often for his skills in writing and how he flowed. The man had skills. The way I saw it and felt about it, Robert had become a total control freak. I remember one night we were downtown Chicago. We had just come out of a restaurant. As we were walking, Rod paid 2 of our crew members $100 each to walk a full block holding hands and switching down the street as if they were gay, just for a laugh. How controlling was that? So as he and Killa worked together, Killa had to suck it up and do things his big brother's way. I used to tell him as he walked around angry, "Don't worry about it, Killa. We all waiting on bro to come back for us. He will," I'd tell him. When we were in St. Louis, Missouri, R. Kelly left his Rolex watch in the dressing room while he went to do his show and it came up missing. R. Kelly told me that it was my responsibility to secure his personal property. We argued because I never knew what he had or where he put his things. So I didn't feel like it was my responsibility. The argument got heated because he told me that he was docking my pay $150. I was heated. And on top of that, my computer was missing. Someone stole it too. As much as I felt that I would regret it, I felt it was time for me to move on. I knew inside that I couldn't contain my temper any longer. Especially with Robert now fucking with my money. I went back into the area, and I told Daryl that I quit. He tried to convince me to be patient, telling me that he would talk to R. Kelly and work it out. I couldn't just wait any longer. This was the last straw. I couldn't afford to waste any more of my life hoping my friend would help me come up. My youngest brother, Joshua, was there at the concert. I got him out the crowd, and he took me home. I didn't talk to R. Kelly or Daryl after that for 3 weeks. I knew that the state-to-state tours R. Kelly was doing were over and they were on their way overseas to perform again. I had already done all the legwork. I sent the rider, gathered all passport information and made the complete itinerary before I left. All the work was done for whoever would take my place. I was sincerely closing the door here. Chapter 23, Unappreciated. I was ready to diminish my relationship and contacts with R. Kelly altogether until I received a call from Daryl asking me to reconsider my resignation and to go overseas with R. Kelly. He said that they were having lots of problems and he needed me over there. I met with Kirk Townsend, who was hired to take my place. He was so glad to see me when I walked up on him. "Demetrius, man," he said, shaking his head left to right. "I envy you," he said. "I wouldn't want your job for nothing. You can have it back. It is too buck wild out here for me," he said. "Man, I get no cooperation out of Robert. How you do it, I don't know, but I am glad you're here," he said. Kirk told me he never would have thought Robert was so out of order, unprofessional, and unorganized. Immediately, I took charge putting things together. His crew was running around like little mice. They were running around back and forth from the audience to ours dressing room, transporting young girls in and out of his dressing room. It seemed as if they were picking the youngest girls from the audience. I didn't fly across the waters to come back into the bullshit. I went back to R. Kelly's dressing room. I went to him and in a joyful way proceeded to do my job. "Alright, Rob. Let's get this rolling so we can leave. It's time to roll. We got a lot to go over," I said as I was picking up his bags to take them out. He got offended and told me that I was not about to come in and start giving him orders. I simply told him I did not fly across the world to get caught up in another country for some young girl bullshit. He looked at me surprised that I had said that. I didn't like it that Robert was not conscious of the danger he was putting himself in with the company he was keeping, and I wanted to fight with him now. I wanted to take charge to be his true friend, and if he wasn't going to listen to me, then I couldn't do this again. It was no longer a question in my mind. Underage girls had proven to be his weakness. He was obsessed, sickly addicted. One word led to another. And R. Kelly and I were arguing. A lot of hurtful things were said. It got heated. I told him I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay unless he allowed me to do my job. After stating that, I left the dressing room. I was hurt. I thought by Robert requesting me to be there, things would be different. I sighed to relieve the stress of my friend continuing to hurt himself. I thought to myself in lonely despair, asking him the question, "Man, Robert, can't you see what you're doing to yourself?" I just couldn't reach him or get through to him in any way. As much as I regretted it, I wanted no part of supporting the evilness I saw forming. I just could not do the same things I had been doing with him. I couldn't turn my head and overlook the fact that his boys weren't looking out for his best interest, messing with possibly little girls. I had to let him know by making a stand against him. As usual, it didn't work in my favor. That same night I quit again. Robert was not paying any attention to me as I told him my job was also protecting his image. As far as I could tell, the girls R. Kelly would be entertaining. To be honest, looking at them I could not tell if they were of age. Robert didn't go for the girls I liked, he went for who he liked. They weren't girls of whom I would ask to be my company because for me, they were too young. But for R. Kelly, I didn't know how old they were. I just hoped he wasn't having a problem with having to have an underage girl. The truth is, being a pedophile is a sickness, and just like any other illness, it needs to be treated. It is no doubt that this is a condition that bears shame, but at the same time, ain't nobody better than nobody else. Who is to say you wouldn't do what I have did, faced with the same situation or under similar circumstances? There is an old slavery song that comes to mind. Nobody knows the troubles I've been through. I find that to be so true when it relates to my life. When it comes to people accepting one another for who they are and helping people to what they need, many of us fall short. We see people to be who we want them to be, and that's not always who they are. We are all made better in God's plan. Nobody knows what we go through that makes us who we are or makes us why we are the way we are. For my Mr. R. Kelly, I was willing to stand by him. And what he was going through was normal to me. To some extent that is. But we were at a point here where it was time to get control of things and balance ourselves. And if what he was going through with these girls was not viewed as a problem to him, that was all on him. Robert was not a bad person. A bit selfish. Okay, a lot. But he was not a bad person. He was drunk with the joy of being who he wanted to be. And that was all cool too. But it was time to begin to have balance now. My overall objective was to run a smooth tour, make some money and have some fun. Robert, I don't even think he was seeing me. He was too busy with himself. The business part of the tour. He was giving me hell with running a smooth ship. Mr. R. Kelly was not seeing things. And I mean that literally. He was not looking. Robert was too busy having all the fun. As soon as I got back to Chicago and barely settled at home, I got a call from Barry. Yep, Barry was still Robert's manager. They had worked it out somehow. What I figured was that Barry was only in it for the money then. I had heard rumors that Robert had paid out about $3 million or more to compensate somewhat for the pain he had caused Aaliyah and her family. Barry and I talked about what had gone down in Europe. He told me that I had to learn to put personal issues aside when it came to business and to do what was necessary to continue to feed my family. I thought about his situation, and I was sure then he was there for the money and thought to myself how right he was. My days away I spent with my children. It was always pleasant when my children and I were all together. All of the traveling around the world with R. Kelly and working long hours. I did it for my children. I didn't run the streets chasing women or live a fast life. I worked hard, sending money, providing for them as best as I could and as best as I knew how. During this time, everybody was struggling to make ends meet. When I say everybody, I mean the crew, the guys we hung out with. Robert's brother Kerry called me one evening and said, "Man, I need you, because I'm tired of my brother treating me like shit," he said. He was upset. "I'm gonna do something about it too. I don't give a fuck. That nigga don't give a fuck about me or my brother," he said. "Killa, what are you talking about?" I asked. I had no idea of what he was tripping on. I knew he and Robert didn't see eye to eye because Robert would not do anything to help him get his career off the ground as a rapper. But I did not have a clue about what he was talking about this time. "I got those tapes I took from his ass. And I'm gonna sell 'em," he said. "And I want you to help me, Johnny." "What tapes?" I asked. "Man, Johnny, you know all the time he tapes himself fucking them hoes he be with. And I don't even give a fuck. I took a couple of his tapes out his bag. Fuck Rob, Johnny man. I'm tired of that motherfucker treating me as if I ain't his brother. He don't care shit about us. Robert just looks out for Robert. All he do is give them bitches anything they want. He doesn't give us a second thought about shit. We don't fucking matter to him and I'm his brother." Killa went on raving reasonless. He was running off at the mouth non-stop and totally irrational. He was angry and looking for a reason to feel good about what he was threatening to do to his brother. Yes, Robert did not care about any of our needs and that hurt the people that were really close to him. But I could not see myself helping Killa cross Rob the way he was talking about doing him. I had faith that his brother would come around once things got to a boiling point. And we were at that point. If I had anything to do with it, things were going to get better for us all. "Killa, you can't do shit like that to your brother," I told him. "Man, he don't give a fuck about me or you either, Johnny. You just be working your ass off and that motherfucker don't care about you." Killa was really upset and he wouldn't let me to say anything. He went on expressing his anger. "Man, Johnny, you remember when that nigga got his Benz? You was cleaning it for him one day and he told me you was a good bitch to have around and if you was a woman, he'd marry yo ass. Now you tell me if that's a motherfucker that care anything about you?" "You know I'm telling the truth," he demanded. Killa struck a nerve in me when he said that. Those words kept ringing in my head. Good bitch to have around. But now I am seeing something that is giving me some understanding. That purposes a question? I remember back when we first started traveling back and forth to New York. Rob and I would be in a 2-bedroom suite. And oftentimes he would walk to and from rooms. Freely and in front of me. Butt naked. He would laugh at times as if to take it for a joke. Prancing through the room playfully. "What's wrong with you, dude? Put some cloths on, fool, when you come through here." I would yell out in disgust. I wasn't into that, nor was I looking at Rob or thinking of him to have gay tendencies. But sitting here thinking back, If he said that to his brother, maybe it is a good man he misses having around? The nerve of that dude. I saw Robert as my brother. The brother I never grew up with, and my loyalty to and for him was sincere. When Killa told me that, I felt like I had been stabbed in the heart. But at the same time, I had to keep my cool. I didn't want any part of helping Killa. I thought he was wrong. I mean, R. Kelly was his brother, and I just didn't think it was right to sell out your brother. Something Killa was threatening to do. Killa went on in his rage. Johnny, if you ain't gon' help me, then fuck it, man. I'll call somebody else. And you can tell him. I don't give a fuck, he said. And I could hear the frustration and seriousness in his tone. Where are you, Killa? I asked. He said that he was on the south side of Chicago. I agreed to meet with him at his place. Kelly was a good kid. But now he was frustrated because he felt his brother should help him, and since he wouldn't, Killa felt he wanted to make his brother feel the pain of not caring for a loved one. Killa wanted to hurt his brother back. Fuck my brother were Killa's words. And from the tone I heard over the phone, he meant every word of it. When I got to Killa's house, he was home alone. He played the videotape for me. He said he had taken it out of R. Kelly's gym bag. The tape showed R. Kelly having sex with several girls and women. One of the scenes was with Robert's wife, baby girl, before they were married. Another was with a white girl. He was eating her asshole out on top of his pool table at his house on George Street, and the other scene was of him and a young girl. He was teaching her how to give him head. Killa showed me the tape because he thought I would be receptive to helping him obtain some money. Because of the way his brother was treating him, I wasn't feeling that, even though I was insulted over what he had told me about me being a good bitch. But the thought of betraying Robert didn't develop at all in my mind, because I knew that people and their lives would be devastated if this got out. I felt I had already been a part of too many ruins. I couldn't entertain the thought of helping him, especially since the intent was not meant for good, but for nothing but more evil. I was just there to see what he had. I spent about 2 hours talking with Killa, and he gave me the okay to allow Daryl to confront Robert about the tapes he had. Barry was in town at the time. When Daryl called me back, he told me he talked with them, and they were willing to assist Killa. But they wanted Killa to come to the studio where Robert and Barry were. Killa said he didn't trust them, but said he trusted me, and if I said it was okay, then he would go with me to the studio to try to resolve some of the things he was going through. Killa gave me the tape, and me, with my stupid loyal self, took the tape right to the studio instead of going somewhere to make a copy for security purposes. But I wasn't like that and didn't feel I had to be like that with a person. I took the tape to the studio where Daryl, Barry and R. Kelly were waiting for me. Barry put the videotape into the recorder. He viewed just a portion of it, showing the scene where R. Kelly was in the sexual act with a white woman, eating her asshole out. Barry immediately took the VCR tape out of the tape deck and said he didn't want to see it. He then ripped the tape apart, destroying it. After the tape was disposed of, Robert, Barry, and Daryl went into another room in the studio along with Killa. I don't know what happened in their meeting, but later that night, Robert accused me of putting Killa up to trying to extort him. I argued against the false accusation he made towards me, but it was fruitless. As the days went on, R. Kelly told Daryl to stop allowing me to hold on to Bass Productions company checkbook. He said he no longer trusted me. "It's nothing you can tell me to make me change my mind," R. Kelly told me when I confronted him about his distrust. "If you distrust me, Rob, then I no longer need to be here. This is all bullshit you keep putting me through," I told him. "Then you need to talk to Barry, because I don't need you here if I can't trust you," he said. I didn't feel like going through any arguments with him because I was already 5 minutes away from taking off his head. The nerve of this snake after all I had been through with him. I felt betrayed and disrespected. But I felt like David when he didn't understand why Saul wanted him dead. My feelings were the same. I didn't want to bring harm on Robert because I felt he was one of God's anointed. But I could not understand why he did not want for me to get ahead. When I spoke with Barry, he felt the relationship that R. Kelly and I had ran its course and advised me that for my best interest, I should put some space between us. At least for a while. He said. Barry asked me what I felt R. Kelly owed me. And of course I told him 5%. You need to get past that. That's not going to happen, he told me. What I'm gonna do is tell Robert that you'd like to step away for a while because you're not getting along. I'm also going to ask him to give you a severance pay for all the years that you've worked with him. I'll be on your side in letting him know. Giving you severance payment would be the right thing for him to do. Let's say about $50,000. Would that be a good number for you to organize yourself? He asked. 50 grand. I thought. All at one time. What choice did I have? Yeah, that would be cool, I told him. I could get myself together with that, I agreed. It was 3 days later when Barry got back with me. He told me R. Kelly would not agree to give me $50,000. But he did agree to $30,000. I met with Barry at the Knickerbocker Hotel in downtown Chicago to pick up the check. He had a couple of Muslim brothers meet me at the front desk to escort me to his room. I was excited to get that money. I was disappointed it was not $50,000. But I was in no position to turn anything down. I didn't know what I was going to do with the money. But what I did know is that I felt good about the fact that I was going to be home with my 4 children and be able to provide for them. At least for a while. My plan was to get a job as soon as possible so that I wouldn't have to spend all my money fast. When I got the check from Barry, it was for $24,000. I thought it would be for $30,000? I asked. Robert told Daryl to deduct the computer he just brought you, the watch that was stolen from him, and also for my computer that was stolen. He said as he hunched his shoulders, giving me a smirk as if you know who you're dealing with. Here I was again, wanting to tear Robert's head off. It was then I understood why Barry had security with him, because if not for the Muslim brothers being there, I would have probably gone off into a rage on him. I was boiling hot inside. Nothing was going right for me. Yet again, I asked myself, why were people taking my kindness for a weakness? As I drove home with the $24,000 check in my hand, I told Barry right before I left. All right, Barry. But you know this is wrong. He gon' end up fucking over you too. I was warning him about Robert. Watch, I told him. Robert always crosses the ones closest to him. Watch what I tell you. Barry. I shook his hand as I left. Take care. I said and walked away. Chapter 25. The Voice Within. When I arrived, I was met at the entrance by General, one of R. Kelly's hangout buddies. He was around when I was there and was still hanging out in the lounge area of the studio, hoping for the opportunity to be produced as a rapper by R. Kelly. For now, he was still being a flunky for Rob, hanging around and running errands. Underpaid like most people that clung to him. He told me R. Kelly allowed him to rap and co-write the song, Fiesta, off the R. Kelly TP2 album. You would think that a person who co-wrote a song with the famous R. Kelly would be paid and happy. Fiesta was a hit. But General told me he was very disappointed with the way things were going for him. I told him he had to take a stand for himself. That as long as he lay around under R. Kelly, being his flunky, he wasn't going to do anything for him. He agreed with me and asked me for my phone number. He said he had some things he wanted to talk to me about. After I gave him my number, I went up to the studio where Rob was. When I walked in the studio, R. Kelly was sitting back on the sofa with a young lady in between his legs. She was giving him head. I was disturbed by what I saw, so I told him I'd wait out in the hall while he got himself together. Hold on, he said, stopping the girl and giving her instructions to wait in another part of the studio. Man, what's up, boy? He asked, getting up from the couch to give me a hug. Nothing. Just come to check you out, man. I see you still busy with the ladies, I responded. Damn, dog, you still look the same, he said. You too, except for that hair you tryna grow, I said, rubbing my cheek, indicating the smooth-cut beard and goatee he had grown. Yeah man, so what you doing these days, man? I miss you, he said. I miss you too, Rob, I said, nodding my head in agreement. I'm staying at a church in East Chicago, Indiana. I got saved, man. I'm trying to turn my life completely around, I told him. That's good, man. That's really good, he said, and then added, I've been doing some gospel writing myself. Hey, Peter, pull up, you saved me, he yelled to the engineer Peter Mockran over the intercom, who was in another room. It was a gospel song. How ironic. If this was meant to be, then this would work, I thought. How ironic it was that a few weeks before I met up with Rob, I met a white girl named Shannon that had a voice out this world. In this day and time I would have compared her to Christina Aguilera. I told Robert about her and the fact that I wanted to manage her. I asked him if he would produce her for me. The first thing he asked was how old she was. He said he couldn't work with any girls under the age of 18 anymore. And said he didn't know who to trust, Demetrius. I feel like girls are being planted on me, he said. I assured him that Shannon was 19. So he agreed to meet with her. The next day I returned to the studio with Shannon. She was overly excited to meet R. Kelly. On the way there, I made it clear that the only way we were going to get any production out of R. Kelly was for her to follow my lead in dealing with him. When she auditioned, Rob saw that she had talent and was a cute white girl with a soulful voice. He agreed to work with her under my management. When it was time to leave, he wanted her to stay at the studio with him. He said he had some tracks he was going to let her sing. I told him we'd continue the next day. But Shannon interrupted me, agreeing to stay. Right then, I was pissed with her because I knew R. Kelly was going to lock her in one of the studio rooms and keep her hostage, promising her this and that. And that's exactly what he did. A few weeks passed and nothing was becoming of Shannon's recording. He had her singing with some other girls. But the real deal was he was fucking her and she had stopped listening to me. She wasn't allowed to go anywhere unless it was with him, so after about a month of the same old thing, she was ready to come back with me. During this time, General decided to leave R. Kelly. He called me and said that he took my advice to do things on his own. He told me that he spoke to Barry Hankerson. Although Barry hadn't heard of him before the call, he asked General for my number and mentioned that he wanted to talk to me. I didn't know why. I hadn't talked to Barry for over 2 years. All I knew was that he and R. Kelly were going through something and they were cutting their business ties. I found that out because Rob let me read a letter he had written up for Barry Hankerson. He said Cheryl Cobb wrote the letter for him. The letter was announcing Rob's request to terminate Barry as his manager. Johnny man, I need you with me. Especially dealing with Barry, he said. Rob, you just gotta pay me, man. Like you said, who you gon' share all that money you got with? I said, looking him dead in the eyes and not a freckle of a smile on my face. I was serious about wanting to work for Rob. I still believed the best of Robert was still yet to come. This kid needed somebody with him who loved him and was not afraid to tell him the truth. He needed a true right-hand man and not a yes man. I wanted that position with him. But I also had partiality for Barry too. Personally, I always felt Robert should have apologized to Barry for disrespecting him and his family by being intimate with their little girl, Aaliyah. Nonetheless, that was their business. I didn't want any part of their feud. I just wanted a job. I was living in an 8-bedroom home connected to the church I belonged to with my children, and all I wanted to do was make a better life for them and keep the joyous feeling I had in praising the Lord. I thought if God wasn't going to have the glory for my association with R. Kelly, then working with him was not what I wanted to do. Rob met with a trainer there and worked out. After the workout we went to meet with a couple of his female friends in the restaurant area of the facility. I sat at a separate table as if I was his security, sipping on a cranberry juice, while Rob sat at a table right across from me entertaining his lady friends. I kept noticing Rob staring at me as if I was doing something wrong. I was thinking to myself, what's wrong with this dude? I hope he don't think I'm flirting with them girls. Even though one of them kept turning around, smiling at me, I paid her no mind. I said to myself, if he starts tripping about these girls, I'm out of here. I just was not dealing with his egotistical, pompous attitude. I wanted to be able to share happiness and not be caught up in senseless drama. After a few moments with him staring back and forth at me, he all of a sudden jumped up from his table and motioned for me to follow him. I did. I got up and walked behind him, wondering to myself what's on his mind. I followed him to the men's bathroom. This was where we were going to end things if he mentioned anything about me and them girls. I didn't know what was on his mind. There were no girls or mischief on my mind. My life was for God's glory. When we got into the bathroom, I asked, "What's up, Rob?" He had a serious look on his face, as if something heavy was on his mind. Soon as the bathroom door closed, he turned to me. "Johnny man, I feel the Spirit of the Lord on me," he said with a crying, remorseful voice. "Praise the Lord," I said. I instantly thought that God had intervened into our lives and something miraculous was about to start happening. I was so happy that the Spirit of the Lord came on my heart as well. I began praising God in the bathroom and then we both began to speak in tongues. I was surprised at this. R. Kelly was so fluent with his speaking. I was still a baby, just experiencing this newfound greatness I was feeling. As I was dancing and praising, Rob was doing the same, but he was slowly drifting and dancing his way into the stalls, still speaking in tongues. Then all of a sudden, his voice changed and no longer sounded like his voice. He started sounding demonic, as if another voice had taken him over and began speaking through him. The stall door closed and I started hearing this voice. It was similar to a voice you would hear in a demonic movie where a spirit overtakes you. Like in the movie Exorcist, when the demon took over the girl's body and started speaking through her. I couldn't understand a word. Bics bilig. Shun mo ko de sala tame shala. This voice continued for several minutes. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I became fearful, to be honest with you. At that moment, I began to plead the blood of Jesus, asking the Lord to protect me. Let no weapon formed against me prosper. The spiritual encounter we had in that men's bathroom went for 40 to 45 minutes. And even though we were in the only bathroom of a crowded facility, no one came in the bathroom. When it was over, we came out and walked straight back to our seats as if nothing ever happened. I felt strange and wanted to understand, but Robert didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know what I was dealing with. This was on the top of my list of spiritual experiences. I didn't know if it was the Holy Spirit speaking through Rob or the devil. I was in a confused state of mind after witnessing what I had just gone through. After we left the restaurant, he still did not want to talk about it. He felt like the Holy Spirit that was on him before going into the bathroom was just a moment that he felt he had to praise God. It was a deep moment for me though. I wouldn't let it go that easy. Rob, man, I didn't know you spoke in tongues like that, I said to him. I know the Lord, Rob said. He turned the music up in the car to drown out our conversation. It puzzled me because now I was wondering if this was in any way connected with a demonic group I heard of, the Illuminati. He disregarded the situation, but it left me in wonder as well as slight fear of the unrecognizable voice. Had this man indeed sold his soul to the devil for mere stardom? That evening when I got home, I went to speak with my bishop, Bishop Travis L. Grant. He took me to 1 Corinthians, chapter 14. He would not come straight out and tell me that I had come into contact with an evil spirit because he hadn't witnessed it himself. But from what I had explained to him, he said it was possible that I had come in contact with a strong demon. I believed him because that was the weirdest spiritual thing I ever witnessed. From that moment on, I knew that demons did exist. I looked at Robert in a whole new light. After that day in the bathroom, things began to change for me with women. I began to have strong desires to have sex with every woman I saw. The women began to make sexual gestures and come on to me. I was leaving choir rehearsal and taking the members of my church to my house, which was adjacent to the church, to have sex with them. It was all so easy. It was like the women had the same spirit on them. They were seeking me out. My presence became a controversy within the church. The bishop called me into his office one day and asked me what was going on with me and several members. I didn't lie. I told him that I was having sex with some of them. Wherever I went, I was flirting or being flirted with. I began to believe that R. Kelly's sex demon had entered me in that bathroom. The oversexed attitude started the evening I left the restaurant. Things were changing. My spirituality was being tested, and I was losing the battle. I wanted to have sex with every woman I came in contact with. That wasn't me. General told me he gave Barry my number, but I wasn't expecting him to really call me. For what was my thought? Demetrius, what's happening? Man, I've been trying to reach you. Boy, how have you been? Barry asked, sounding happy that he was able to reach me. I'm fine, B. What's happening with you? I asked. You working? He asked. No, man, I'm living in a church home, trying to get my life right, I responded. Living in a church? He said. Why haven't you called me? If you were going through something, you can always call me. You know that, he said. Well, I've just been trying to get my life right. Barry, I said. Well, I got work for you. You don't have to live in a church. And how are the kids? He asked. Barry showed signs of true compassion towards my living situation. He informed me that General gave him my number and he mentioned that General told him that he had something he wanted him to see. Both Barry and I wanted to investigate whatever it was General was talking about. But first, before you do anything, come down here to New York. Let me show you around the office. Meet some people and let me get you started working for Black Ground. What I've got for you to do, you can do from home, he said. That information aroused my curiosity. That next day, I was on a plane to New York. Round-trip ticket and with a room paid for by Barry Hankerson and Black Ground Enterprises. Change was once again occurring in my life. The life I thought I had put behind me was resurfacing. When I got to New York, Barry put me at the Empire Hotel, a place and area I was familiar with from my travel back and forth to New York with R. Kelly. Barry had a car pick me up at the hotel, take me to his office at 155 19th Street. Barry was really happy to see me, and I was happy to see him also. He took me around to see everyone who worked for his record company. The position he offered me was Director of Promotions. I was to be in charge of getting urban radio stations to play Black Ground Enterprises artists' songs. He gave me a list of every radio station's directory. My job was to call them and get them to play Aaliyah and Tank. I was excited about this job. It was a real job and I could work it from home with the record company paying the phone bill. Barry offered me $40,000 a year and when I would have to travel to different cities. My expenses would be paid by the company. I accepted the job. It required me to talk and be persuasive, which was second nature to me. I stayed with Barry, visiting his office for 2 days. When I got back to Chicago, I had an $800 check with me. I had been paid for the first week in advance. It had been a while since I had money. I was so excited that I went to work on the phone right away. Barry shipped cases of Tank's album to me, so I began to call directors of radio stations in the South. After talking to several directors, I had to send them a copy of Tank's CD. I had a gift of gab already from way back when I was working with Clifford. So to be personable with people, to make them like me and to make them laugh was somewhat easy for me. Within the first week I found myself making friends over the phone and being invited to attend different radio station functions from Georgia to North Carolina. Barry began to get calls about me with people requesting that I attend their parties. I was definitely making an impression on the people I was in contact with. I was able to get a few of the stations to add Tank on their playlist. I thought I was doing what Barry wanted me to do. But Barry told me to slow down. He wasn't ready for me to start flying here and there just yet. So basically, I mailed CDs out and gave the CDs a chance to reach its destination before making any follow-up calls. As the weeks passed, Barry sent my checks to me by FedEx on time every Friday morning. During this time, R. Kelly was pursuing me also. I told him that I was considering working for Barry, which really angered him. I asked him if he was ready to put me on the payroll. Once again, he told me I'd have to hang around and work my way back up. I have to live, Rob. I have to take care of my family, I told him. When I asked how much he was going to pay me to hang around, he told me he'd pay me $300 a week. But I can't have you with me if you're working for Barry, he said. I told him $300 wouldn't be enough for me. And that's when he mentioned Shannon. Yo girl, man, I really won't be able to work with her. She really ain't got what it takes. I knew that was bullshit. Shannon apologized for not listening to me. But it was all good. I liked Shannon, so I figured I would just introduce her to Barry. Since Shannon had been staying in one of the corner rooms of the studio, she had nowhere to stay, so she went back home with me. I was uncomfortable with her being there with me, and I was uneasy about what people in the church would think about me having a young white girl staying with me, so I kept her on the down low for a couple of days and then took her back to South Bend. General was calling me a lot more now that I was with Barry. He wanted a record deal and was angry with R. Kelly. He asked me if I could keep a secret, and when I told him I could, he told me he acquired some of Rob's personal tapes and he wanted to sell them. It was a fact that R. Kelly's gym bag was recently stolen from him at a gym on the West Side. Inside the bag were supposed to be some personal tapes of R. Kelly and a diamond necklace worth $10,000 or more. Rob had a reward out for that bag and he asked me to keep an eye and ear open for information regarding it. Up until then, I hadn't heard or seen anything regarding the bag or the tapes. The first person General wanted to contact and show the tapes to was Barry. He asked me if I could set it up for him to meet with Barry. I told him I'd give Barry a call. And I did. Barry was not really interested in the tapes. He told me to keep my focus on the job and to beware of General as well as R. Kelly. He told me he was trying to help me get my life straight and that I didn't need to involve myself in anybody else's drama. A week passed and I hadn't heard from Barry. One night he called me after 10:30 p.m. telling me he had received a letter from Robert and his attorneys saying Rob no longer wanted him as his manager. Barry felt disrespected by R. Kelly. To Barry, R. Kelly was a piece of shit, he owed him a lot of money and was refusing to pay. This betrayal piqued his interest in wanting to know what was on the tapes. Barry then asked me to meet with General to view the tapes. When I called General, he informed me that he was home in Philly, so Barry flew me out there. General met me at the hotel I stayed in. Of course he didn't come alone. He was accompanied by 2 other guys who stood while we viewed the tapes as if they were there as his security. Before letting me view the tapes, he told me this was not a joke. The people behind him are playing for keeps, so I better be looking out for myself. The tapes were of different sexual encounters that R. Kelly had with several girls. Please note, this was not the tape with R. Kelly urinating on that little girl he went to trial for. Most of these girls seem to be mature adults. However, General didn't show me all the tapes he had. I asked General what he wanted and he told me that he wanted a record deal and some cash. I also have some other tapes, but I want to wait to show those to Barry if he decides to meet with me. If not, then I have some other people that are interested in putting these tapes out, he said. The tapes I saw were nonetheless incriminating and would indeed damage R. Kelly's reputation. Most of the women on the tapes were of adult women, but there were 2 on there that did look like they were very young girls. This bothered me for some reason. I felt a bit of pain for R. Kelly and a need to help him. I spoke to Barry once General left my hotel room. I told him what was on the tapes. And after we talked, he said he'd give General a call himself. I flew back home that night. I thought if only Rob had me with him and had treated me right, none of this would be happening. I protected him. I had his back. Now these other people he let in. They were snakes out to destroy him. Once I arrived in Chicago and got into my car, I decided to drive over to the studio in hopes that Rob was there. And he was. "What's happening, Demetrius?" he asked. "What brings you out?" I didn't waste time with him beating around the bush. "Rob, somebody's out to hurt you," I told him. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I saw the tapes," I told him. "Who's got 'em?" he asked. "I can't tell you that, Rob. 'Cause it would endanger me. All I know is we can get him. Even if you have to buy them back. You need to get them," I told him. "You need to tell me who got them. Either you're with me or against me, Demetrius. I need to get them, and if you can't tell me, then you need to leave," he said. "I'm not about to be extorted by nobody." He went on to say, "Who got them?" he asked again. "Rob, I can't tell you that. Every time in the past I have turned some information over to you, you'd set me up, leaving me to be the fall guy. I can't do it in this case. There are some very dangerous people in possession of your tapes, man. And I'm not going to set myself up to be hurt." General gave me some names of some of notorious people that were also interested in the tapes. I didn't feel Rob would have my back. And because I would not expose who had the tapes, Rob told me he would look at me as his enemy along with Barry. Finally, I left, and I felt good about what I did to warn Robert. It was all I could do. I wished he would have thought about how in the past I had always been upfront with him and how I always did what was needed to protect him. As I was driving, I thought to myself how Rob felt he and his money could get him out of anything. I left it at that. I was ready to get back to my life. I didn't want anything to do with the tapes or assisting Barry to get the tapes from General any longer. I just wanted to work the job Barry gave me. I was somewhat disappointed though, because although I had hopes of being back in association with Rob, I realized that it was not God's will. It was clear to me as I was driving home who I was going to be working for. Rob was no longer someone I was going to concern myself with any longer. The job Barry had me doing was a new beginning for me. That job and that job only was good for me as far as I was concerned. Barry and whoever else wanted the tapes that were stolen from Rob were going to have to leave me out of that part of their business. That night, When I got home, General called. He had a young lady on the line with him. Demetrius. I got this girl on the line with us. I told her how you assisted Tia with getting an attorney. And she wants you to help her. And she's willing to pay you too, he said. I immediately told him I didn't want any part of it. I asked him why he was so stuck on bringing Rob down. He said he just thought I would be interested in making some real money. No, I don't want any part of any of it. The tape or nothing else, I said. As far as the tapes are concerned, we won't discuss that, he said, seeming a bit nervous that I mentioned it with the girl being on the phone. When I told them I had to get off the phone, the young lady spoke for the first time to ask me if I could refer her to an attorney. No, young lady, I don't know of anybody. General asked me if I knew the name of the attorney Tia used. I insisted at that time that I had to go. I wished the young lady good luck in her pursuit to find a lawyer and said my goodbyes. General asked if he could call me back after he had finished with whoever the girl was. He had on the line with us. Said he had to speak to me about something personal. It was an hour later when he called me. I was just about to fall asleep when the phone rang. Man, Barry Trippin, he said. He said that Barry wasn't interested in the tapes. He went on to mention that some of his own people had set up a meeting for him in LA with someone that was interested in the tapes. He asked me if I wanted to go along with him and offered me 10% of whatever he would get off the tapes. I asked him how much he was asking, and he told me $50,000 for each tape he had. I'm not going to lie. I thought about taking him up on his offer, but I decided to pass. I turned over and looked at my daughter lying in the bed in a peaceful sleep. It confirmed that I was content working for Barry and receiving the $800 a week I was getting. The next day, I spoke to Barry and told him about the girl General had on the phone when he called me. Barry advised me to stay out of it as he himself said he didn't want anything to do with the tapes that General was trying to sell him. After that, Barry and I were on the phone with each other every day. I kind of felt he was a bit obsessed with Rob because he was all we talked about. We talked about the old days and what we thought could have been done to make things turn out better. Barry knew as I did that Rob was alone. The people that were around him in the beginning weren't there anymore. And he didn't really know the new people he had working for him. Barry and I both felt most of them were flunkies. And yes men. We knew that R. Kelly's problems were just beginning. Barry was sounding a lot like me, hoping that Robert would reach out, apologize and allow all of us to pick up where we left off, taking his musical career to the next level. It was just wishful thinking. Barry's love for Rob was mixed with the pain that was caused when he messed with Aaliyah. Rob would never admit that he was wrong concerning Aaliyah. He stood by the choices he made and the way he treated the people that cared about him most. I took Barry's advice not to call General anymore. But he still called me, giving me updates on the progress he was making with selling the videos. He also told me that the girl he had on the phone for a referral to a lawyer found one in Chicago and they were coming to the Chi to meet with her. He asked me to talk to Barry to arrange an audition for him. General still wanted a record deal. Chapter 26, The Setup, LA Bound. Working as a director of promotions was still bringing in a weekly paycheck and I really wasn't doing a lot of work. I was on the phone with Barry every day. As I said, he was obsessed with Robert and I somewhat felt like I could get them together. I felt they both needed to be face to face in the same room with one another. When I would suggest it to either of them, they both had negative things to say about each other. I saw through their facade and knew that they both had a love for each other. But pride wouldn't allow either of them to humble themselves to gain unity. Once, while Barry and I were on the phone, the young lady from Miami called. She was the one General had asked to call me. She told me she was in Chicago to meet with an attorney and she was at the Conrad Hilton Hotel in downtown Chicago. I put her on hold and clicked over to tell Barry that she invited me to the hotel to have dinner with her and her aunt. I asked Barry what he thought and he told me to go see what they were up to, but to be careful not to say anything to them that would incriminate me as being part of any scheme. Barry was like me when it came to R. Kelly. If we knew something was going on that may cause him trouble, he wanted to be on top of it. Barry always gave me the impression that in spite of what they were going through, if Rob would just ask, Barry would, without hesitation, come to his aid. I accepted the young lady's invitation and told them I'd be right down. When I arrived to her room in the Conrad Hilton, which is an expensive hotel, being that it was right in the heart of downtown Chicago, I was uneasy and wondered how this young girl could afford to stay at this hotel. Nonetheless, when she came to the door, I was invited in and introduced to her aunt who was lying on one of the double beds. Her name didn't register because my mind was scoping out my surroundings. Her aunt started to question me about what I wanted for helping her niece. I actually haven't done anything to help your niece and I don't want anything. This is all her doing, I told her, pointing to her niece. I came down for the free meal and to meet this gorgeous aunt that she told me about, I responded, in a flirtatious way. Her aunt didn't move much from the position she was laying in when I walked in the room. Right when I was about to sit down, there was a knock on the door. I was somewhat startled. Just relax, the aunt said as she finally got up from the bed to answer the door. We ordered food just before you came, she said, opening the door. When she opened the door, a big bald-headed white guy came in, holding a badge out. Demetrius, just relax. My name is Jack Palladino. I'm a detective, and we've got you for trying to persuade this young lady to bring false charges against R. Kelly. What? I asked. I was shocked and scared at the same time. I didn't feel like I did anything wrong and I wanted nothing to do with the law and being arrested. Just relax. Demetrius, Palladino said again as he began to sit across from me. We don't want you, Demetrius, he said, even though I can bring up several charges against you, with you looking at least doing 5 years in Statesville with your record. We want Barry Hankerson. At that point, I just sat back and listened, looking around calmly for the opportunity to escape. I figured the way he came in, if he was a detective, I was set up, and I was waiting and looking for the backup police to come in. We know that Barry Hankerson is behind this by manipulating you to turn this girl against R. Kelly. And we know that you and him are in possession of some missing tapes. Mr. Kelly told me to tell you that if you work with us, we'll compensate you. In my mind, I thought, Rob crossed me again. Think about it for a minute, Demetrius, before you answer, because as of right now, you're going down and you're looking at about 5 years. Palladino sat back trying to be cool as if he had gotten through to me. I must admit, sitting there with the thought of going to jail and serving 5 years had me shaky. But when I didn't see any other Chicago police arriving, I began to think of a way to get out of that room. I need to talk to my pastor, I said. I ain't did nothing wrong, I said. I got from my seat and went to the telephone. I'm calling my pastor. He knows about all of this, I said, and picked up the phone. I dialed a 1-800 number that gave me a direct line to call out so that the number that I had dialed would not register to the hotel room. I did not want them to know that I called Barry. He was expecting my call because he told me to call him and let him know what was going on with this girl. He answered the phone. Bishop Grant, I said, pretending I was talking to my pastor. They got me in a room, saying I'm under arrest for trying to set R. Kelly up. Are they right there with you? Barry asked. Yes, sir, I said. And then I whispered into the phone, letting Barry know that I was using a toll-free 1-800 number so they can't trace the call. Yeah, well, you need to get out of there. If there aren't any other police officers there, just leave. He can't stop you. He has no authority to put his hands on you. You haven't done anything wrong. Just don't talk to him about anything and call me when you get to a free line, Barry said. Alright, I said and hung up. I got off the phone and became belligerent, walking toward the door to leave. I'm not getting ready to sit here and allow you to threaten me. And I ain't done nothing wrong. Y'all trying to set me up. I'm leaving. If you're a police officer, where is your backup? I asked him, hunching my shoulders to indicate to him I was ready to get physical. I don't know you and I ain't standing here and letting you intimidate me, I said. I was hoping that this dude didn't reach out to grab at me as I made my way to the door, wondering to myself, what the hell have I gotten myself into again? Damn it, I thought, fucking with Robert Kelly. Palladino began to move at me toward the door as if he was about to try and stop me. You better not put your fucking hands on me, man. 'Cause I will be going to jail for fucking your ass up if you put your hands on me, I told him. And I was serious. My spirituality had been compromised. All I wanted to do was get out of that room and get back home. I walked out the door and Palladino followed close behind. You're not going to get away, Demetrius. If I was you, I'd cooperate because I can have you arrested right now, he said. Well, you ain't me, motherfucker, I told him. And I left. As I stepped into the hallway, I was looking for his backup police officers. And there were none. Palladino was behind me and got on the elevator with me. I didn't say shit to him and wasn't hearing shit he was saying. My mind was thinking, when this elevator stops, if ain't no police in the lobby, dude would have to step up off following me. When I got downstairs, there were still no police around. I turned to the dude. Palladino, that is, man, you need to get away from me. If you were going to arrest me, I'd be cuffed by now. So you need to get up off me, man. And stop following me, I told him as I began walking toward the exit. Palladino looked the opposite direction, waving toward the main lobby of the hotel and yelling for house security. While he was looking for backup, I quickened my steps. As soon as I got outdoor and turned a corner, I broke and ran to my car. I was safe now. He wasn't going to catch me. Not tonight, that is. Lock me up? I didn't think so. At least not then. I was happy and nervous at the same time. When I got to my car, I felt the adrenaline rush from being a free man. Just moments ago, my freedom had been threatened. I had gone to Rob like a man, with his best interest at heart, warning him that someone was out to hurt him and this punk wanna put a private detective on me to try to set me up. Some real Perry Mason punk-ass shit. Driving home, I thought about General. I was trying to figure out how he was involved. This dude had tapes on Rob. But I wondered why would he put this girl on me like that? Maybe he didn't have more than one tape. Maybe he was using the one he showed me so he could pull me into Rob's web and set Barry up. I thought about Barry's words. Of how he felt like Rob was a low-down piece of shit. And I was saddened because I felt the same way. He tried to set me up instead of coming to me as a man, as a friend and as a brother. I always showed that type of love for him. This dude was out of pocket. He had sent a private investigator at me and threatened to take me away from my children. I was angry at Rob and at General. When I got back home to the convent, I parked my car a block away and walked to my house. I figured if the police or anyone came looking for me, I could get out of the house without them seeing me and get safely to my car. I wasn't going to jail. That was out of the question. I wondered why God brought these people back into my life to cause me trouble. My life was going well. I didn't have money, but I was building a life of promise by being in the church. In the short period of time I had connected back with R. Kelly, I had come into contact with his sex demon. Now I was a whoremonger, and on top of that, I was about to become an outlaw, a possible fugitive on the run. The very thought of going to jail and leaving my children Made me ready to do a James Cagney on a motherfucker. Even though I hadn't done anything, I wasn't going down without a fight. When I got into the house, I called Barry. B. What's happening, man? You tell me. Where are you at? He asked. I'm at home. I left that hotel as soon as I got off the phone with you. I told him. So what happened? What was all that about? He asked. I told him what transpired throughout that short period of time. I told him that I felt General and R. Kelly tried setting me up in an effort to get me to join sides with them by accusing him, Barry, of being the mastermind of any and all wrongful acts that were in R. Kelly's way. What? Barry said, surprised. What are you talking about again? He asked, as if he didn't understand me. Yeah, B. That dude Palladino told me they knew you were behind R. Kelly's missing tapes and you were manipulating me to persuade the girl General brought to me to file charges on R. Kelly. Demetrius, you're kidding, right? Barry asked. Nah, B. Palladino told me I was looking at 5 years and that they were going to prosecute me. Well, you need to get away from there for a few days. Come up here and let me get you an attorney to get them to look into this from a legal point to get them off you. What's wrong with Rob, man? Barry asked me. I don't know, B. I just don't want any drama. I just want to work and be able to support my children, B. I thought I had walked away from this drama and now they're pulling me right back in again, I said, jokingly. Yeah, well, you need to get on up here until we straighten this out. When can you get here? He asked. Well, I've got to get my sister to come babysit, and I'm gonna need some money to take care of her, I said. I'll get my secretary to call you with your flight information for tomorrow evening. What's your sister's name? He asked. I'll wire her some money to keep the kids for you. Get in contact with me if you need anything before then. And call that boy General and see what he has to say about this, and I'll talk to you later, he said before he hung up. I was fortunate to have Barry Hankerson on my side. Funny how God puts things in place. When we don't think there's a way out, He's already provided for us in advance. I wanted to do the right thing in God's eyes concerning the decisions I was making with going to LA. And in dealing with R. Kelly. My true thoughts were to cut my ties with Rob. I just wanted to be able to be at home raising my children. After I got off the phone, I called General. He was astounded when I told him of what I had gone through with the young lady he gave my number to. You bullshitting. That funky-ass little bitch was planted on us, man, were his words. I told him that I felt he was a part of the plot. If I was part of setting you up, then why would I have these tapes, he asked me. General swore he wasn't part of any plot to bring Barry or myself down. He told me that he was going to be in LA the coming week to meet with some people that were supposed to purchase the tapes he had. General offered to give me a little of the money he would make off the sale to assure me that he was not part of the incident with the girl and Jack Palladino. The idea to receive some cash sounded appealing to me. I wasn't going to turn down any free money. If he was just going to give, then for sure I would take it. Thank you. In reality though, my plan for being in LA was to see if it was possible to establish a foundation and a relationship for me and with my children. If everybody around me was hustling and taking money from each other, then that was their business. But for anyone to assume me to be guilty by association is not fair. I wanted to begin to separate myself from bonds which held me to the past. I did not want to continue to be in association with Robert, Barry, and any and everything that was coming with them. For now I was going to go along and see if I could make my ride smooth. It had been too many years and it has just not been conducive for me. I was leery of association. I was a victim in knowing there was no truth in these cats. Yeah, things would roll for a minute. But man, I was tired of holding onto a rope. With them, everything kept changing. It was like Rob was a relative of Murphy's Law. With him, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I wanted something solid for once in my life. Oh yeah, it would have been lovely. But that ride was over. When Barry returned, he asked me if I wanted to stay and he offered to help me get started. Next thing I knew, Daryl McDavid left a message for me at my hotel stating that he wanted to speak with me. How in the fuck did he know where I was? I wondered. I was freaked out. When I talked to Barry about it, he sent me to meet with his attorney, Ricky Ivey, in downtown Los Angeles. He sat and listened as I explained what happened in Chicago with Jack Palladino. Subsequently, he sent a letter to R. Kelly's attorney demanding that he cease for harassing me. After 2 weeks in LA, it was clear for me to go home. Once we moved in and got settled, I met a lady named Lena who worked at JCPenney at the Fox Hill Mall. She became my children's babysitter while I attended school at the United Education Institute for Business Administration. After graduating from the school, I was hired by the school as an admissions representative with a salary starting at $37,000 a year. I no longer had any desires to work in the music industry. It was gratifying for me to be able to go to work doing something I liked and come home to my children every day. We were a happy family. We missed home, but we went everywhere and were having fun going to Universal Studios, Great America, to the beaches and to church. We joined the City of Refuge Church. Chapter 27, Cunning Ways. This was a different tape. Actually, there were several tapes that had been put together. The one I was looking at was of R. Kelly pissing on a little girl. Once I recognized both of them, R. Kelly and the little girl, I chose not to watch the tape. I was sorry to see Robert making the adjustments to the camera he was recording himself on. And the girl, I forget her name, but I remember standing and talking with her at the I Wish remix video shoot. She had grown up, filling out and looking like a woman that is. But she was still a young girl. That tape was made at his home on George Street. I recognized the room in his basement and the room decorations on the tape. I was the one who picked that place out for him to live in when he was looking for property to buy. On top of that, I was with Robert for 13 years. Knowing that it was Robert Kelly on that tape, I felt somewhat let down. After viewing the tape, General told me that the tapes were being sold all around the country. He opened a closet to show me boxes and boxes of tapes. There were copies packaged for distribution. He said that people were out on the streets throughout the country selling them. I was sad for Rob. I didn't feel he deserved that. But he was the one that made the tape. I had a clear conscience that I had nothing to do with it. I actually tried to stop it. When General initially informed me that he was in town, he said it was because he was there to record with Barry. He wanted me to manage him. But I told him I was out of the business. I was happy working an 8-hour job and going home to my children every day. I left there without a tape in my hand. General said that his money was due to arrive and he would get with me. I didn't trip on it. On occasion, General would stop by my house in Inglewood, pursuing me to be his manager. He felt Barry would help his music career move if I was a part of it with him. But being in the music business was something I had no interest in at the time. Going out teaching my sons how to play basketball and baseball, taking them to vocal lessons and picking my daughter up from dance school was all more intriguing. To me, listening to them quote books and verses of the Bible and watching them grow was what I had passion for. One day Barry stopped by the school where I worked and mentioned how impressed he was with the changes I made in my life for me and my children. Everything was going well for me in my life. I had not heard anything from R. Kelly. But Barry and I were staying in touch with each other. But it was just out of concern and friendship. Then one day Rob called me. I was so surprised to hear from him. My reaction was like that of a person awaiting a ransom call. You know, I got jumpy nervous, but at the same time I had to be cool. When I answered the phone, I almost didn't recognize his voice. "Hello," I said. "Demetrius," the voice said, sounding as though they were crying. "Rob, what's wrong, man?" I asked with a tone of urgency. I was taken back to times I was there with him and ready to stand by his side. But I was 2,000 miles away, and that reality set right in when I asked him, "What you need, Rob? What can I get you?" I knew the porno tape of him and the young girl he urinated on while having sex with her had been circulating throughout the country. "I'm an outlaw, man. I need you to come up here," he said. "Rob, what can I do?" I asked. I truly wished it was something I could have done for him. But there wasn't. He went on to say, "Get with Daryl, man. He'll take care of what you need to get here." I was living in Inglewood, and I wondered how he had gotten my phone number. "Rob, I can't come up there." "What is it? Talk to me." "Rob," I asked. I knew how R. Kelly was and how he acted. The strain he was trying to portray to me over the phone wasn't getting to me. "Man, I need you to get with Daryl," he said again, sounding as if he was crying. I shouted into the phone, hoping to get through to him to talk to me and stop whining. "Rob, man, talk to me. Rob, quote." I yelled into a dead phone. He had hung up. I felt Rob was trying to play on my emotions, hoping that I would react to the anguish he had portrayed over the phone, which would cause me to come to his aid. As I thought about it, there was nothing I could do other than tell him something that I know he wasn't going to do, and that was to call Barry. Barry had ties to a lot of influential people, and Barry would know what to do to help him. We talked about it in the past, and Barry said if Robert would call him, he wouldn't know what he would do. But I broke Barry down to recognizing that he loved Rob, and after a short debate, he agreed. R. Kelly needed to make amends to some wrongs he had done. He needed to fess up, come off the high horse he was on, and pull the team back together. We all wanted it. All the old crew, Larry, Barry, Tori, and Jomo. We all loved Robert, but he only thought of himself. After Rob hung up, I called Barry, but he did not answer his phone. He was en route to Atlanta, so I left a message. Rob called me. Can you believe it? Hit me when you get this. He called me as soon as he touched down in Atlanta. "Demetrius, did he call you for real?" he asked. Without even saying hello first, I felt that Barry had an obsession with R. Kelly. He was his artist, and Barry wanted to be there for him. It was R. Kelly who made everything difficult. "You think he'll call me?" Barry asked, with a bit of hopeful excitement in his voice, I thought. "I don't know, B." He was acting like he was crying, saying, I'm an outlaw. I need you." And then he hung up. I told Barry that Rob asked me to come down there with him. Barry was inquisitive as I was. "For what?" he asked. After we talked about R. Kelly's call for a few more moments, Barry advised me to stay away and that it could be a trick. He said R. Kelly was looking for a scapegoat. We both agreed my life was going fine without involving myself in something I have nothing to do with. Barry also assured me that whatever I decided to do, he'd stand behind me. With that said, I knew if Robert Kelly really wanted help this time, he would call me back. And if he would call, I would try to persuade him to come to LA. I felt it would help if I could get R. and Barry to sit down and talk. At least, that is what I would have liked to have been able to make happen. Robert never called back, but General did. This dude was in Chicago with R. Kelly. Demetrius the First was with R. Kelly when he called you. I gave him your number. He called me in Philly, and as I was talking to him, I decided to come down and talk to him. General had flipped the script. Everybody looking for tapes, and he got him. I was shocked when he was telling me he was in Chicago with Rob. "Man, what are you talking about, General?" was all I asked. I didn't want a part in any type of double-cross scene. I didn't want to talk to this dude. He was up to no good. What are you up to, man? I asked him. Put Rob on the phone, I demanded of him. I was going to tell Rob of the snake he was keeping company with. I was going to tell him General was the one responsible for the tapes being put out. Man, I know how you feel about R. Kelly, man. And you know like I do who put that tape out. And that wasn't right, he said. What are you talking about? You the one circulating those tapes. Did you tell Robert that? I asked him. I told him I knew about them. And I told him Barry sent someone who bought the tapes from the contacts I knew of and that you knew of Barry's involvement with the circulation of the tapes. In regards to who got 'em and put 'em out, that is. General whispered into the phone. Play along with me on this, Demetrius. We gon' get paid out of this. This dude was crazy. I thought. Dude, who you playing with? What is wrong with you, man? I asked. Why would you lie? I asked him. Why would you tell him I knew of something I didn't? What are you trying to do? I asked him. I was again being put in the middle of someone else's game of trying to come up by using me as a tool to help them prosper. And at the same time, they would call themselves looking out for me by making me some petty-ass bullshit monetary offer. So I listened to General. And in my anger, I became heated. I shouted at him into the phone. Did you tell him who put the tapes out? 'Cause remember you brought me to a house where you had boxes of copies ready to be distributed? Did you tell him that? I asked. General was dirty as dirt could be. Yet he was attempting to keep himself looking squeaky clean. I was enraged at this dude. The nerve of him trying to use me to throw blame at me for something he did. And then to try and set me up to be a part of his scheme. I had thoughts of setting aside my righteousness. Get on the plane and go to Chicago to set him out. General was, as Barry said of Rob, a piece of shit. General, I don't know what you're up to. But I don't want no part of it. And I'd appreciate it if you'd lose my number, because I bet you ain't told Rob. What he do? Promise you your record deal or something? I already knew that Barry wasn't interested in General's music, stating that he didn't feel he had what it took. Man, they said they would compensate you. Won't you just fly down here and talk to the man? He asked me as if he wasn't listening to anything I said and talked like he thought I was listening to what he was saying. Man, listen, I said. If R. Kelly or Daryl want to talk to me about anything, they can come up here. You're perpetrating some crazy shit, General. I don't know why you would involve me with this. I'm out, man. And I'm gone. Let Barry know you putting his name in some shit. You snaking, man. And I ain't even trying to know where you at. I hung up the phone. It was some strange shit going on. I called Barry. I said when he answered the phone, laughing. Yeah, what's happening, man? He asked. Man, you ain't gon' believe this, I said. General just called after I got off the phone with you. He's down in Chicago with R. Kelly, I told him. He's in Chicago with Rob, for what? He asked. He called to try to get me to come there, saying they would compensate me. Compensate you for what? He asked. I explained everything that General and I talked about. Barry was upset and told me he would have to call me back later. He wanted to contact his lawyers. Said he was going to put an end to the bullshit that was being stirred up. Well, like I said, Demetrius, if you feel that you've got something to offer them, then that's your choice if you want to go up there. No, I have no intention at all of going up there. I cut Barry off in the middle of his sentence. I didn't want him to have any notion at all that I wanted to leave LA to go talk to Rob. I felt Barry was feeling I was going to betray him and go lie on him. But that was not in me to lie about something I didn't know anything about. If he did have something to do with putting the tape out, he did so without me having any idea of it. This was the last straw for me. I was going to cut ties with everyone from this day forward. My whole life was being pulled in a direction I didn't want any parts of. There was evil in the midst of my association with Rob, and I wanted out for good. I was convinced no good was ever going to come about for me being involved with Robert Kelly. He's got them thinking you had something to do with the distribution of the sex tape that's out. I said, well, Demetrius, that guy will pretty much try to do anything or say anything to get a record deal. It wouldn't surprise me, nor does it worry me. I know what I do every day. He can say whatever he wants. He don't know nothing about me, Barry said. Let me call you back later. We'll talk then. All right then, B. I was just letting you know. I told General not to call me no more. I'll holler at you later, man, I said. All right, Demetrius. If you want to go up there to see if anything is in it for you. Be careful, Barry said. I ain't going nowhere, B, to see nobody. I'll talk to you later, I said, and we hung up. Chapter 28. Tragedy Strikes. Barry and I were growing to have a greater respect for one another as men throughout this R. Kelly saga, ordeal, even though I didn't see him much at all while I was in LA. From our frequent phone conversations, I was really getting to know him, and I had grown to have a great deal of respect for Mr. Hankerson. He and I had gone through a few mishaps from time to time, but he never talked at me in respect to teaching me the ropes of the business. He showed me when and where I would go wrong. He would also compliment me when I completed a certain task. In the earlier days, I used to think Barry was somewhat of a snake in the grass. During this time, I was getting to know the man and no longer saw him for who I thought he was. Getting to know Barry as a man helped me to understand the term. People don't believe what they see. They see what they believe. I was getting to know Barry now as the good man that he was. He was no longer an image of a villain in my eyes. He was an inspiration of wisdom and a main factor for my reason for being in LA. Things were going good for me during this time. With Barry helping me to get my life situated, I was making some real progress. My life was beginning to have some balance to it. The way my life was going with Barry in it, I could not help but think that this man had my best interest at heart. To come to think of it, whenever Barry was around, he wanted to see that I was coming up. He mentioned to me that he would be willing to match funds with me to help get a house for my children and I. Barry knew I was done working with or even wanting to work with Rob. I was putting the pieces to my life back together. Still, I had a condo. I had a good paying job working for UEI and attending to my children. They were involved in acting and taking vocal lessons with Ms. Jody Sellers, an awesome vocal teacher. I must mention this lady because she offered her services out of admiration for the support I was giving to my children. Twice a week, Jody would give my 4 children lessons. Also, I had the children working for a casting agency who kept me pretty busy employing them as extras in movies. My daughter Ashley and son Demetrius Jr., Michi, were both in Bow Wow's movie like Mike, and my youngest son, DJ, was on one of Bernie Mac's episodes of The Bernie Mac Show. It was August 25, 2001, and I had just returned from a vocal lesson with Michi and Ashley. Finally, I thought, a chance to sit down to relax from a long busy day at the office. I turned on the television and a news broadcast came on announcing a plane crash that took the life of Aaliyah. My God, I can still feel the pain. I was heartbroken, as I know so many others who loved her were. No, 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 I cried. Oh God, no, I cried. I could not believe the report I was hearing of her fatal accident. But I didn't want to hear it. I did not want for it to be true. In my pain, I thought about Barry, Aaliyah's parents, Mike and Diane, and her brother Rashad. Oh God, was all I could think and say. The news of Aaliyah's death caused a pain in me that paused my breathing. Just when things were beginning to balance, I'm hit with another natural disaster. I could not begin to imagine the pain Barry had to have been experiencing, let alone Aaliyah's parents and her brother. I even thought about Rob. I knew all of them as well as a lot of people in the world were grieving. I heard as well. My pain was for Aaliyah's mother. I felt for her. I called Barry. When he answered, I felt his pain. It was the first time I had ever heard him sound weak and hurt. "I'm sorry, Barry," were the first words and the only words I could muster up to say out of my mouth. I didn't know what else I could say that could comfort him in this time. If I could have been a tear that could relieve him and his family from the pain they were suffering, I would have taken their sorrow. "Yeah, thanks, Johnny. Aaliyah's gone, man." I could tell that it took a lot for Barry to say those words. He was holding himself up through this tragic moment. I am sure his family needed him to be strong. Lily's gone and in God's hands now. He does what he do. I don't know, man. But she's gone. "My niece is gone, Johnny," he said. Again I could hear it in his voice. He was holding in his pain and not wanting to break down with me. On the phone, he told me he had to keep himself together for the sake of his family. I didn't know what to say. I know his pain was deeper than mine. I sat holding my daughter as she cried in my arms. "Barry, I'm here if you need me for anything, man," I told him. "Yeah, I know, thanks. I'll talk to you later," he said and hung up. After Aaliyah's funeral, Barry and I still talked. But not as much. We both wondered how things might have turned out had R. Kelly not violated the family's trust. He insinuated that I, more than likely, would have been Aaliyah's tour manager. And I truly believe, had I been with Aaliyah, I would hope that things would have turned out better. God does what he does for his will through our purpose. We might not like it. In fact, we never like chastisements. Nor do we understand the debt of chastisement. We just know that it hurts and somehow we make it through day by day. Some of us are never able to let go of the pain. Chapter 29. I Surrender. During this time, R. Kelly had been indicted on distribution of child pornography charges, so I figured they were searching for a way to get Robert off the chopping block. Nothing had changed with Rob. He sent Daryl to try to convince me to sign a statement stating Barry Hankerson was the one who put the videotapes out. During the visit, Daryl told me Robert was willing to get me out of jail, give me some money, and have his attorneys represent me with the case I was on. The getting out part sounded good to my ears. I didn't know what it was they wanted to hear from me. But I wasn't going to lie on a person. I actually didn't know anything about the distribution of the video. But if they thought I did, I was going to ride it out with them as far as I could go. My trial date was coming up, and I knew if I had a good lawyer, it was possible I could get out from under this case. Daryl promised an attorney would be there on my trial date to represent me. I wasn't going to tell these cats to go away. I wanted out. My faith was willing to find a way. The preliminary was important. If I could just get the lawyer to beat my case in the preliminary hearing, Rob and his lawyers could all kiss my ass. They already knew General had taken the tapes. And that's the only part of it I knew. I didn't get into their business where I was allowed to profit anything. On my hearing date, a lawyer was there to represent me, because I had not written anything other than what they already knew. They wanted me to sign some papers they put together. When I wouldn't, the attorney asked the judge for a continuance for the following day. At that hearing, they withdrew as my representative. I hadn't talked to Barry for months. I could only call Dorothy and Anna collect from the jail. I had been locked up for 3 months when my mom told me Barry called inquiring about me. She told him where I was. And of course, he asked her why I hadn't called him if I was having a hard time. I guess he got to know my mother over the phone because she got him to get me out. When I called him to thank him, he told me he bailed me out because of my mother. I was somewhat ashamed of myself. I got lost for no reason at all and sacrificed the safety and security of my children for material gain. Chapter 30, Under the Influence. So many years have passed since I've talked with Robert Kelly, Daryl, and even Barry. After a long struggle, I was able to let go of that life. The era I stored in my memory under R&B. Robert and Barry. I was so infatuated with that lifestyle. The things it provided, the journeys it offered, and the people it placed me with. I lost my way. I am clean and sober without regret in my history. I have made a lot of bad decisions. But I survived to tell my story. I followed the wrong people, places, and things and lost my life, my children, and my integrity. I was the man behind the man, which meant nothing to the world, but everybody's fall guy. I was so busy making sure that everybody's life around me ran smoothly, that I forgot to take care of my own. I didn't provide what my family needed most, which was for me to be the head of the family and to be there. It was my duty to love and provide for my family through the body of Christ. It was me that continuously invited the devil into our dwelling. Most of all, I never invited God in with my heart. I meant well and my intentions were always for the good, but I always allowed the devil to occupy even the smallest space in my mind. He was always in my company, and it was not until now that I realized that he is someone who has been by my side for the past 54 years without me being aware of it. He accompanied and protected me throughout my life. Everyone has a story to tell and everyone's life has value. Our purpose, I believe, is for us all to be a blessing to one another's life. What you do today in your life affects the life of someone else. Your life, it's not all about you. Demetrius Smith, author, The Man Behind the Man, Looking from the Inside Out, October 2011.